education, ICT for the educations, language education, environmental education, as well as she also guided the MPhil students, the PhD students, and she also completed the UGC minor projects 10 and the major projects 4. She also has the 33 years teaching experience at UG level 6 years and the PG level 28 years. She also published 5 books, as well as she also published the 47 research papers. And she also worked in the administrative levels also. She works as a professor and the director, CES IIE, a research institute, professor and head in the university department, the member coordinator NAC, the IQAC member, the chairperson and the member of the administrative bodies and the committees in the universities and of the inspection committees of the colleges of NCTE. She is also the member of the selection committees of the university, teachers and the college principals of the UGC and the university. She also works as a rector in the university hostels, and she also the master trainer in India, the Maharashtra, Goa and the Kerala states for the globe. She also the master trainer for the Intel India. She also works as a paper setter and the evaluator in the state Maharashtra, Karnataka, Telangana states, paper setter and the evaluator entrance exams of the PhD, MPhil, MEd of the Maharashtra State University, work as an evaluator, postdoctoral research thesis, PhD thesis, MPhil dissertations, universities in India. He also works for the curriculum constructions for the MPhil educations and the MPhil Women Studies, Shivaji University, Kolhapur. She also works as a MEd syllabus of the NCTE, New Delhi member of the Curriculum Framework Committee, Shivaji University, as well as the YCMOU Nashik and the Pune University. She also curriculum for the B.Ed curriculum, national level of NCTE, New Delhi, and the Shivaji University, as well as Shivaji University, Kolhapur. She also structured the BSc B.Ed syllabus, 4-year syllabus, NCTE, New Delhi, member of the Curriculum Framework Committee, and also from the structures BA B.Ed 4-year syllabus of the Shivaji University, Kolhapur. She also participated in many more conferences, national, international conferences, workshops. She organized, also participated also. She also published her research paper, presented also research paper in the international conference in Valencia, Spain, in the year of the March 2011. As well as she also organized the many more conferences, seminars, workshops, national as well as the international. And this is her brief introduction. So we welcome you, ma'am, and please guide us regarding this research methodology. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sarita. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
I'll just minimize this and I start my work.
Yes, ma'am.
I have to share the screen, right? Can you see the screen?
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am.
No, no, wait.
No, ma'am.
Wait. I'll end the show. 1 minute. Huh? I think, wait. I can't see the share screen. I can't see. Okay, 1 minute. I should have done the scares. Okay. 1 minute. Huh?
It's a green button.
1 minute. Hello? Oh God.
Yes, ma'am. There is a green button which is written share screen. Just click it on.
No, but then right now what has happened, I've minimized it and I can't find it. This one? No, not this one. You can't see my screen, no?
No, ma'am.
May I join again? May I join again?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
I think I'll do again.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
That will be better.
Screen sharing again join.
Yeah.
Yes,
No, I have this.
join again.
1 minute. I'll just join again. Okay. What happened was I missed joining a meeting. I'm there. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, we can hear you, ma'am. We can hear you. We can see you. But screen is not.
But I'm not able to share the screen. No? Where is the green button? Yes. Yes, I got it. I had minimized it. Okay. Share screen. Now can you see? Can you see the screen?
Yes, madam.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Okay. Now I go. Sorry. Okay. Today, Dr. Geeta Shinde ma'am had given me this particular topic, writing research report. Okay. And all of you can see and hear me. I'll minimize my this. Okay. Now we start. Okay. Writing research report. Now, when you say writing research report, that means some research has been done. And after doing some research, it has to be reported. So when we report the research that we have done, we do it in 3 forms. We do it as dissertation or thesis. I've used the word THESES, that is number of thesis. One thesis is THESIS. Okay. So we present the research in the form of a dissertation or a thesis, or we publish it as a research paper in any research journal. Or sometimes what we do is, if the research that we have done is of interest to interest to the public or interest to the layman, like for example, research on nutrition, which every person can use the result, then what we do is we publish it in the newspaper or magazine. So we write the research report. Okay. So and when we write the research report, it is in different forms for different purposes. Okay. So when we write in the form of a dissertation, the format of a dissertation and a thesis is similar because it is standardized. Any PhD thesis is relevant to the whole world. Okay. So you can do only one research on one particular topic. Nobody can do the research on the same topic again and get a PhD degree. So you only on one particular topic in one particular area, one person can do the PhD, and that is reported in the form of a thesis, and it is submitted in a standardized format, standard format. So if your thesis goes abroad in any corner of the world to any professor to assess, it will be easy for him to assess without any confusion. That is the reason why we follow a standard format. Am I clear to everybody? Okay. Now so dissertation and thesis reporting is always said to be formal. Why do we say dissertation and thesis reporting is formal? Because we have been asked to do this. We are doing it and submitting to an institution because you are doing it formally to get a degree. You get an MPhil degree, you get an MA degree, MPhil degree, or you get a PhD degree. So it is very formal. You have to follow the procedures that is given by the institution. Now, who gives these procedures? It is the UGC that has determined in India how a PhD should be. And the universities have the liberty under the BUTR, and they they formalize it in a certain way, how to conduct this PhD degree and how people should submit it. So it is formal. You submit your research report to a particular institution. So it is said dissertation or thesis is submitted to an institution. Which is the institution? It is always the university under which maybe you are working in a college or in a university, but the PhD degree is submitted to the PhD thesis is submitted to the university, and the university takes the responsibility of getting us assessed. Assessed by whom? By the examiners. Who are the examiners? They are the PhD evaluators. So they are the ones who evaluate your PhD thesis or your MPhil dissertation or MEd dissertation, and they will check whether the topic is perfect to do PhD, whether the whole procedure is okay, and whether you have conducted the research in a proper manner. So it is assessed by the evaluators of PhD, and then they award the degree. They give the result as fit to be, it can be accepted. The PhD work can be accepted for the award of the degree of PhD by this university. This is how an evaluator gives. So the dissertation or thesis reporting, research that is done for a dissertation or for a PhD thesis, is said to be formal, institutional, and assessed. Okay. Now, research paper publication in research journal. So sometimes many times we do research papers for publication. Why do we have to publish the research papers? I'll come to it later on. Research paper for publication is also said to be formal, and it is peer reviewed. Now, who writes the research paper? It could be a professor who writes the research paper. It could be an assistant professor, or it could be even a research student, a student who is doing her PhD, or an MPhil student, or any lecturer or any assistant professor, associate professor, or professor. Now, why do we say research publication is formal? Because we have to submit it to the editorial board of a particular research journal. So there is a form. It is a very formal procedure has to be followed, and you have to submit your research paper to that particular research journal. It is said to be peer reviewed because when a professor does some research and he wants to publish a paper, he submits his research paper to a particular research journal, and what they do is they have a committee of experts, other professors who are experts in that field. It could be, for example, environmental education, or your paper could be related to computer education, anything. So it is sent to the experts in that field, and they they review your paper, whether it is fit to be published in that particular journal, and then they approve it. So this research paper publication is said to be formal and peer reviewed. And there are other research-based articles in newspaper and magazines that we publish that is very informal. You may send an article because you have done your PhD level research, and you feel that a part of it will be of interest and it will be useful to the public. What we do in magazines like Eve's Weekly, Femina, or newspaper like Indian Express, somewhere we try to present an article on nutrition or on health and hygiene. Whatever findings you found, we publish it for informally for public interest or for public awareness. Okay, these are the three forms of research reporting. So today, first I'll be speaking on how to write a standard, using a standard format, how to present your research that you have done for your PhD in the standard format. Okay, for a dissertation, now we do not have MPhil, but those who have already started your MPhil, you may continue and submit your MPhil thesis. But new MPhil courses will not be run anymore as per the new policy of education. Now the thesis, PhD thesis, yes, there's a standard format which we will be following. This I'll be discussing now. Now, PhD thesis writing, printing, and submitting. The looks. How does when we present our PhD research report in the form of thesis, how does it look? It is submitted as a hardbound copy to the university for assessment and award of the degree after approval. I said hardbound copy. Why don't we make a soft copy of the soft copy and submit the PhD thesis? Now, I think in some universities, the first draft is sent as a soft copy and it is sent to the examiners. Goa University does that. A spiral binding of the copy is made and it is submitted to the examiners. After evaluation, sometimes they suggest some corrections, sometimes they reject, sometimes they accept, sometimes in spite of accepting, there could be some errors, mistakes, and so many errors that need to be corrected. Sometimes it is marked by the evaluators, and then the soft copy comes back, the spiral bound copy comes back to the university, and after corrections are made, final copy of the PhD thesis is always a hardbound copy. Hardbound copy of the thesis is made and submitted to the university for final assessment. This hardbound copy can be kept in the library safely for years to come, and the other researchers, juniors who are interested in that particular area will be reviewing your thesis as their review of related literature. Hence, it is a hardbound copy to be kept in the library. And this hardbound copy, once you submit to the university, it goes for assessment. Some universities say send it for 2 examiners, some send it for 3 examiners. And so in some universities like Rajasthan, there's an option of sending it to examiners outside India also. Okay, so it is when you send it outside India, Rajasthan, if your research guide has suggested a name of an examiner who is outside India, then the university in Rajasthan asks you for extra money for sending your thesis out and getting it evaluated, because it is expensive to send it out of the country. So this is what is done. And after it is submitted, after the evaluation, sometimes it is accepted, sometimes it is rejected, sometimes it is given for modification. It goes to a third examiner sometimes. Okay, this is how it is submitted. Then the thesis has to be in black cover. It should be black cover with gold embossed words of the title page matter on its front cover. The front cover of your thesis is a black cover with gold embossed words. This is the standard format. Now, there are some universities I know, like Mysore University had done a blue cover, but that is not a standard format. Maybe the BUTR group of the members of the BUTR of that university at a particular stage wanted it in a different form cover, so they made it blue in color. But actually, the original standard format is always black cover with gold embossed words of the title page matter on its front cover. So what does the title page matter contain? The title page matter of any thesis will have the title of your thesis, title of your research, that is the topic of your research. Then after the topic of research, we say this is submitted to for the award of the degree of PhD or for the doctoral degree to this particular university. Okay, submitted by, then you give the name of the research student, and guided by, give the name of the research guide, and then submitted to which university you will be writing the name of the university. And after the name of the research guide also, after you write the submitted to a particular university, you have to say it is submitted for the in the subject of education, in the discipline of education. So if it is, for example, subject of history, it is the discipline of social sciences. In the case of education, we have subject education and also discipline of education. Okay, so the PhD thesis format, the components of a PhD thesis, we have it is divided into 4 major parts. Okay, the first part is called as the preliminary sheets, And the second part is called as, second part you have the body of your PhD thesis, body of your research, which you have done, and that is presented in 5 chapters. Then we have the references. References you give of, and then it is followed by appendices. So appendices have many appendix, which are which is absolutely essential to be a part of the thesis. So when I say 5 chapters, yes, this is a standard 5 chapters. But in some universities, sometimes they have more chapters. Maybe one of the chapters, like, yeah, the 4th chapter could be your analysis chapter, can be divided into, they may have one chapter for quantitative analysis, another chapter for qualitative analysis. Or some universities give the liberty to deviate a little from the standard format, but it is not a healthy way of writing a good thesis. Okay, these are the 4 major components of a PhD thesis, how to write.
There any page limit, madam?
Pardon? Yeah, I'll come to the discussion a little later. Okay, let us. I will just finish this and then we can discuss. Okay, then, okay, the preliminary sheets. What goes into the preliminary sheets? The pagination in the preliminary sheets are very important. What is the meaning of the word pagination? Pagination means how you write the page numbers. Okay, this is again absolutely a standard format of the APA style. Okay, now we have the standard APA style is followed in psychology and education all over the world. Okay, also that is why if your thesis goes abroad also, there's no confusion. If you have done in the proper, you're submitted in the proper format. So the pagination is the how you write the page. In the preliminary sheets, how do you write the page numbers? You have see, I have written here, right? The title page is your first sheet of your preliminary sheets. Okay, the first sheet is title page. The title page, what does the title page contain? It contains the topic of your research or the title of your research. Then again, you write the same thing that was on the cover of your PhD thesis. So what was on the cover of the PhD thesis? You submitted the title and then it is submitted to a particular university for the award of PhD degree or the doctoral degree in the subject education, in the discipline education, submitted by the student's name, guided by, and then which university we write. So that is on the title page. And what should be on the title page, some of the universities have given it in their PhD prospectus. I know one thing, Shiva University had a prospectus of PhD. They had given a certain rules that had to be followed. Okay, the title page. So what is in the title page? Every university gives what should be in the title page. Then the second page, see how I have page numbered it. The page number you can see is small Roman letter I, small Roman letter I of that is used as a numeral here. So the small letter I is the single I for the first page, and for the second page declaration, it is 2 I's. Okay, 2 I, small letter, small Roman I letters are there, 2 I's, and then that becomes number 2, page number 2. That is the declaration page. Declaration page of the preliminary sheet. What do we write in the declaration? It is the student who declares. It is only the student who declares there that all the work I have done is original. None of the part of the thesis has been copied from any other source, any other thesis, or from any other book. So whatever quotations or citations have been done in the thesis has been acknowledged duly at relevant places and also given in the references. So this is what a student declares. Okay, it is a PhD student declares, the researcher declares that it is not a copy of any other PhD thesis from any part of the world. Okay. Now we have the third page of the preliminary sheet is called as a certificate. Certificate has three small Roman numeral I in three form thrice. So that becomes the certificate. That is the pagination for certificate. Certificate is given by whom? By your research guide. Only the research guide gives it is not a head of the department or anybody else. The certificate is given only by the research guide. So the research guide on his or her letterhead will certify that this particular person has worked under me and has done his research and has not copied this, any part of the thesis is not copied from any other source or from any other PhD, and wherever he has referred other research works or other books, he has duly cited and references duly given in the appropriate places. That is how the words are given in your prospectus, so you can see how it is written. But this particular certificate is given only by the research guide, and it is the third page of the preliminary sheet in your thesis. Then we come to the fourth sheet, that is the acknowledgement. The acknowledgement is given only by the researcher. Now, how do you write an acknowledgement in a research thesis? Acknowledgement means what? It is a thanksgiving. Now, thanksgiving has to be recorded. Now, remember when you write this acknowledgement, this is not you remember one thing, this PhD thesis that you're submitting is not your personal property. It is a property jointly owned by you and your research guide. Because you see in your title page, you see on the thesis or cover also, you have your name and also the guide's name. So it is a joint property. All the material that is in the thesis is the intellectual joint property of you and your research guide. So when you write the acknowledgement, remember one thing, this thesis is a formal document, a sober document submitted for evaluation to the examiners, and they will examine your PhD thesis in a formal way, in a standard way, and then they will pass it or fail it or ask for modification. So when you write the acknowledgement, be very formal. Okay. So what do you write in the acknowledgement? The first acknowledgement, the first paragraph of the acknowledgement, whether you like your guide or you don't like your guide or not, sometimes what happens is, in many cases in the university departments, what happens is your guide is one of the junior most staff in the department, and you have many senior teachers who has been guiding you unofficially. So you have the tendency to please the senior professors, and you have the urge to thank the senior professors first and then try to thank your research guide. But remember one thing, in this thesis, only your research guide signature is valid. Only your research guide signature is coming in the certificate. If he or she has not signed the certificate, you will not get your PhD degree. So her signature, her guidance is very valuable, and it is your moral duty to acknowledge your research guide in the first paragraph. So the first paragraph, acknowledge your guide for having accepted you as your research student and then guided you throughout the research, right from choosing the topic till the submission of the PhD thesis. So be honest and be very grateful to your guide and put it in words in a formal way. After you thank your guide, the next paragraph in the acknowledgement can be devoted to the teachers in the department who helped you. Now, teachers in the department, why should you thank other than your guide? Because the teachers in the department, like for example, we have a PhD coursework. In the PhD coursework, many teachers in the department can come and give you lectures. They come and give you lectures on research methodology, on research reporting, on research, on sampling, on research design, on so many aspects of research. Many of your research teachers will be coming and giving you lectures. So all this has helped you to do good research, remember. So it is not just writing the research report. All the lectures teachers have given you during your MA, during your MPhil degree, during your PhD coursework, or every lecture is important. Every little point that you have learned from the teachers will be useful to do correct research, do the research in a correct form, and then submit and write a good thesis. So that is the reason why you have to acknowledge all the teachers in the department who helped you finally to prepare this, conduct the good research, and help you to write this research report in a proper format and submit it properly, correcting you at every step. So and after this, the second paragraph, acknowledging the teachers of the department. Again, whenever you acknowledge all the teachers, where there's nothing personal here, like I like her, I don't like her. No, there's nothing like that. Everybody, a teacher is a teacher. From everyone we learn. So acknowledge every teacher in the department, and that is how it has to be written. Now after that, it is your duty to, in the fourth paragraph, it is your duty to acknowledge uh, the principal, or from where you have gone and collected the data, the person who allowed you to collect the data from a particular institution. Suppose you have gone to a school and conducted the data, or from a college you have gone and conducted the data, collected the data. You have to acknowledge that person to have helped you to permit you to collect the data. And don't forget to thank the students who were participants of your research. That is the students who answered your questionnaire, students whom you interviewed, or all the participants. It can be teachers, it can be principal, it could be the students from whom you collected, parents from whom you collected the data. In the fourth paragraph, so thank them for having allowed you to collect the data, and which enabled you to analyze the data and present this particular thesis. Okay. After you acknowledge this, then you can acknowledge the librarians who allowed you to go to different libraries and and collect the data. In some of the PhD thesis, or even in research projects, sometimes there's a large amount of data which cannot be analyzed manually. We take the help of some other technology, like Tata Institute of Social Sciences, etc., for statistical analysis. In case you have sought the help of some statistician, then please do acknowledge him in the next paragraph. After that, there is a lot of tendency among the young researchers who are not very serious about research. Such researchers, what they do is, especially the married young girls and young boys, especially the girls, they have the tendency to want to thank the husband, put the husband's name, write all their children's name for having helped to conduct the data, sometimes father-in-law, mother-in-law, everybody. This is a official document. This is your examination paper. There is no scope for acknowledging the family. At the most, if you want to say, I thank the family for helping me at every stage to do this research. But you cannot go on writing their names. If you really want to thank them, you can do it personally by publishing your PhD thesis. After you've got the award of the degree, you can publish your thesis in the form of a book. In the book, you have complete liberty to acknowledge your husband, your father, your mother, anybody and everybody. And even acknowledgement, sometimes they acknowledge the institutional heads and all, acknowledge the institutional head. And yeah, I would like to mention at this point, after the title page, or even before the title page, there are some institution I still know, especially when they are conducting research on Vivekananda and all. The institution of Vivekananda institution, the founder of the institution and all, the first page, they print the picture of the picture of the founder of that institution. No, it is not permitted. In the BOTR, many of the university, we had discussions on this. You are not allowed to put any personal thing to please your institution and all. Don't put people's photograph and all that in any place, even dedicated to. Sometimes this also we had discussed in the BOTR many times. Some PhD thesis, there's one page devoted to, dedicated to my father-in-law, dedicated to my husband. No, you are not allowed to dedicate your PhD thesis, because this is an examination document. It is, you will get your degree or you will reject. There are times when I had rejected a PhD thesis and told them, resubmit this thesis after removing that page of dedication to your husband. So things like this, do not let it happen. Okay, so please be very formal. It's a sober document. Title page, declaration, certificate, acknowledgement. Acknowledgement, be very formal. Then after you thank the acknowledgement for the participants of your research, because without the data, you could not have done this research at all. So people who helped you to collect data, who gave you data, acknowledge them. Then lastly, usually, if you want to thank your family, in one words, family and friends, I acknowledge all my family and friends for helping me to conduct this research and present this research report. In one sentence you can write, and in the book that you publish on your PhD thesis, you write whatever you want. Nobody is going to check you there. Now, contents of your research. Now, acknowledgement usually comes in 1 page or 2 pages. It depends on how you write. So now, if it is 2 pages, then page number 4 and 5. Again, remember, it's small Roman letters. Okay, small Roman letter 5 and small Roman letter I. That is page number 6. That is for contents. Now, contents page will be, in the content page, you have the chapter number. In the chapter, you have the chapter number, chapter 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, etc. Preliminary sheets, then chapters, etc. So you have the chapter numbers, then you have the, that is title of the content. So all the content titles will be coming, title of your chapters, and sub points in the chapters all will come there, and then you have the page number. So this is the content part. Then you have in the preliminary sheet, that will go in a number of pages. Then you have in the next one is a list of tables, then list of graphs, list of figures, list of pictures. So whatever it is, like if it is some may have list of maps, or whatever it is, what is a part of your thesis, you will have to give a list. So this is how preliminary sheets are presented. It is presented, be very careful, it is presented in brackets in the top middle of the page. Okay, it is in the top middle of the page. It is not on the right hand top, like we write in the page numbers of the chapters. In the chapters, how we write, I will come to it later on. So in the preliminary sheet, how you should write, I've just explained to you. Okay. Now, chapter 1. See how chapter 1 is written. Chapter first, so it is not O-N-E, it is F-I-R-S-T. How do we write F-I-R-S-T in Roman letter? It is Roman letter capital I. Chapter chapter first is written as chapter Roman letter capital I. Okay, that chapter first is always the introduction. Okay, some instructions that has to be given is Roman capital letter I for chapters. Now, pagination, the first page of the first chapter is not numbered. So when we start chapter first, the first page is never numbered, but the second page is numbered as 2. Now see how the 2 is written. The 2 is written in Arabic numeral. 1, 2, 3, the way we have written the numeral is in Arabic numeral. So in the first page, we don't write number 2. And this is without brackets. We are like in the preliminary sheet, we had put brackets. In page number 2, it is not page number 2, there's no bracket. It is put on the right-hand top corner, right hand of your page, on the top corner of the page, 1 inch from top, and from the right side at that particular point, you will be typing page number 2. Then the Arabic numerals should run through the whole thesis till the last page of the last appendix. Then we know how many pages are there in your PhD thesis. I hope you have understood this. Okay. Now, basic components of in chapter first. Now, chapter first is always called introduction. Don't go and write a brief review or something else like that. Don't. There's nothing fancy in this. You cannot change the standard format. Some people have a fancy to change and make it the thing. Sometimes if your evaluator is very strict like me, then you had it. Then you will be in trouble. So stick to the standard format that is followed all over the world, so that it will have a good look. So chapter first is called the introduction. And in the introduction, what do you write? In the chapter first, what do you write? You write an introduction. You have to introduce this particular chapter. How do you introduce? Like, as we always say, introduction is from general to specific. Now, general is whatever your topic of research is. So everything that, like, you have more than one variable in that. In your topic of research, if you have many variables like interest, aptitude, attitude, etc. You're studying the attitude, aptitude, and something of somebody. So you have so many variables. In the introduction, all these variables are very much a part of your introduction. So how do you write the introduction? Introduce what is if you're talking about the different personality factors, then you say a person is made of different personality factors, and these are the different variables that are there in the personality, and how all these factors of interest, attitude, aptitude, all these influence, and what are you going to study. So in the introduction, you should briefly introduce the reader of your thesis. Who is the person going to read your thesis? It is all your researchers who will be using your research thesis as their review of related literature. Okay, so who are the others reading your PhD thesis? It is your evaluators, it is the examiners. So they should also understand how you started doing your research, and what was in your mind, and how did you do your research. So you should introduce a reader to the topic of your research by going from general to specific. Now, after you write the introduction, how many pages you should write the introduction? It depends on how many variables are variables are there in the study. A, a researcher who has got extremely good language ability, a person who has got good language ability, can write the introduction in a very concise form using good language, and all the contents what he has in mind, he can easily present it in a very concise manner. But if the person does not have good language ability, then he will be writing a long introduction, because he has to communicate everything that is in his mind to the reader. Otherwise, you cannot skip factors or issues, then the person will not understand what you're going to do research on. So after writing the introduction that leads to the topic of your research, then you write the statement of the problem. The statement of the problem, actually, what is the statement of the problem? It is not just the title of the problem. Statement of the problem actually is the title plus all the explanation of the particular title. So the statement of the problem is you write the title, and then you try to define the terms and phrases in the title. The terms and phrases. What is a term? Term is a single word. A phrase is a group of words which gives a different meaning. Okay, like for example, student. Student is a term. Student means a person. We can define it as a person who is studying a particular subject and is taught by somebody. And you have a teacher. Teacher is a term which says teacher is a person who is teaching a particular subject to a particular student. Okay, in a formal setting. And what is a phrase? Phrase is a group of words. For example, student teacher, student hyphen teacher. Student teacher is one phrase which means something totally different. It means that student teacher means a student who is studying for or undergoing training for the purpose of for purpose of becoming a teacher. A phrase will have a totally different meaning from those of the terms in that particular phrase. So that is the reason why we have to define the terms and phrases in the title of your research. If you do not define it properly, the person reading the thesis, the evaluator get a different meaning altogether, and he or she will reject your thesis. That is the reason why it is very essential for you to define the terms and phrases properly. Okay, now the definition is of three types. One is the nominal definition, one is the conceptual definition, and the third is called as the operational definition. Be very clear. You should be very clear on this issue. Nominal definition is nothing but the definition that is given in the dictionary. There's a lot of disturbance. I think it's from the office or somebody's speaker is on. Hello? Definition. So there are three types. One is the nominal definition, conceptual definition, and the operational definition. Nominal definition is the definition that is given in the dictionaries or in the encyclopedia. That is a common meaning, a meaning that is common to anybody and everybody who refers the dictionary. For example, anxiety. The word anxiety means an unknown fear. That is the dictionary meaning, an unknown fear which has no reason for it. Okay, now that word is known to everybody. But anxiety in the conceptual definition, anxiety means, for icing, the word anxiety, according to research, his research may be exam anxiety. For somebody else, the anxiety could be marriage anxiety. So the definition of anxiety differs from person to person, from theories of theories to different theorists. So different psychologists may have different meanings, a conceptual meaning based on his research. So operational definition is what? Operationalist definition is one, which definition which you have chosen from which theorist. For example, you have your whole research work is on marriage anxiety. Then you say marriage anxiety is what, as per the definition of Eysenck, or whoever has defined in his theory. So, for example, I'll tell you a more easier example. For example, personality. I'm trying to find out the personality of school students. So if I'm finding out the personality of school students. So the nominal definition of personality is what the dictionary will give. So what the definition of personality, what I would choose is what Cattell has given. Why do I choose that? Because I'm going to use the 14 PF what Cattell has 14 PF questionnaire of Cattell I will be using. The 14 PF of Cattell has 120 items, 140 items, a number of items. So whatever the items measure, that is all what is meant by personality according to me. So what is the tool that I use for research is my operational definition of personality. So the operational definition is always the tool that you use for measuring a particular variable. For example, intelligence. So the operational definition of intelligence will be the intelligence is what the Stanford-Binet scale measures if I'm using the Stanford-Binet test. Suppose I have developed my own intelligence test, or the researcher has introduced his own intelligence test, has developed his own intelligence test for this particular thesis. If that is one of his objectives, then what will the operational definition of intelligence of students will be? The intelligence of students will be what the tool developed by this researcher measures. So you have to name your tool, intelligence test of school students. So you have to say intelligence test of school students developed by this researcher. Whatever this measures is the intelligence of the sample. So this is how you define the operational definition. If your work, it is also called as working definition. If your operational definition is not clear, again, your evaluator will draw wrong meanings, your conclusions will not be understood properly. Your thesis may not be accepted. So please define your terms and phrases properly, conceptually and operationally, so that the reader of your thesis goes with you and will not misunderstand. Okay. Now, objectives of the study is another very important aspect of your first chapter. Objectives of your study is study. Now, when you write the objectives, what are the objectives? So whatever variables are there in your title, you may have, as I told you, interest, aptitude, attitude. So you have to see that your objectives covers every variable that you have used in your title, like to find out the attitude of students, to find out the interest of the student, to find out the intelligence, whatever is in your title, all that should be a part of the objective. If your objectives do not cover the title of your research, what will happen? Then your research is incomplete. It will not be accepted. Now, when you write the objectives of your research, see that you do not write anything that is not in the title. So suppose attitude is not in the title and you also like write attitude and try to find out the attitude, then your examiner will say that is not a part of the topic, and so please delete it and resubmit your thesis. So be very careful when you write the objectives. How to write the objectives are very clearly given in Best and Khan, and also in C.R. Kotari. Read the two books very carefully. So there are rules of writing a good objective. When you write objectives, remember one thing. You have to write to find out the intelligence of students, to find out the intelligence of girls, to compare the intelligence of boys and girls, or to find out the difference between the intelligence of boys and girls. But do not write to study the intelligence of boys, to study the intelligence of girls. The word study is actually the definition of the study. Like we usually write the topic of research and you say, then you say a study of intelligence, attitude and aptitude of 8th standard students. What does a study word in the title mean? A study purely means research. Research, that you're for doing research. So objectives of the study or objectives of your research, you cannot have to study the intelligence. You have to write to find out the intelligence. To find out the intelligence, what are you going to do? You are going to test the intelligence of students by using a intelligence test. So when is the word to study used? Only in the case of case study. Only in the case study research you can use the word study. If you go through many theses, old theses, you will find a lot of mistakes. Sometimes the examiners have ignored, the research guide has ignored, the student has ignored. A lot of mistakes are there. The word study purely means research. So you're not doing research on intelligence, you're doing not research on attitude, to find out the attitude, to find out. So you be very careful. When you write the objectives, be very specific. What does it mean specific? You have to test the intelligence separately, test the attitude separately. Only when you want to compare, for example, compare the intelligence of boys and girls, then you say to compare the intelligence of boys and girls on intelligence. So you only there the two variables will come in one objective. Or to see relationship between intelligence and adjustment. Then again, two variables have come in one objective, but here to see relationship. So when you have to see relationship, what are you going to do? You are to find out the intelligence, you are finding out the adjustment, and then you're going to see whether there's any correlation between intelligence and this thing. So objectives have to be very specific to find out something, to compare something. You can also have an objective called to develop a intelligence test, or to develop a personality test can be a part of your PhD thesis. Okay, so objectives of your study should be extremely specific. Now, this is followed by assumptions. objectives of study followed by assumption. Assumptions of a thesis. From where do we get these assumptions? Now, there's a lot of confusion in students about assumption. Assumption is something that we get from theories or something that we already know. Like the same example I give every time because students remember this and understand it better. Suppose it is very cloudy today. So what does the theory says? The theory says that when it is very cloudy, it is likely to rain. So what is my assumption? It is very cloudy today, so it is likely to rain by evening. So my assumption is coming from the theory. Similarly, whatever your variables are there in your topic of research, for that you can have some assumptions from the theories on intelligence, from theories on attitude, which is already the related literature and the researches that you have reviewed. From there, you draw the assumptions related to your variables of your study. So assumptions are from like, it is cloudy, so it is likely to rain. Now, next comes the word hypothesis. Okay. Now, I've just not written here. Write down the word hypothesis. Now, what is the difference between hypothesis and assumption? In many theses, I found both together and both are wrong. Now, assumptions are something that comes from the hypothesis, but it is not an assumption. Assumption is, for example, as I told you, it is cloudy and it is likely to rain. So I make an assumption today it is going to rain. That is my assumption. Can I test the statement that it is going to rain? I cannot test it because it may actually rain or it may not rain. If the clouds, if there is heavy winds and the black clouds are driven away by the wind to another part of the city, then it may not rain at all. So I cannot test my statement that it is likely to rain. That particular statement I cannot test. So assumptions are those statements that we write in the thesis, which we draw from the theories related to our variables, which cannot be tested, but it is likely to be true. For example, the assumption is intelligence and academic achievement is highly correlated. If the child is highly intelligent, the academic achievement is going to be very high. So this assumption is commonly known. Over the years, people have done research and it has proved every time high intelligence, high academic achievement, low intelligence, low academic achievement has been proved. Okay, so this assumption, we cannot take up such assumptions to do research again, which is already done and everybody knows as a part of theory. Okay, so assumptions are those which in one part of the world, if it is true, we want to test whether it is true in another part of the world, then we frame hypothesis based on the assumptions. Okay, so hypothesis is a statement that we make about the variables. You can make a hypothesis only if you have two or more variables. Now, I can make a hypothesis. You can have two types of hypothesis. You can have a research hypothesis, which is a positive statement, and there is a null hypothesis. The same research hypothesis is converted into a null hypothesis, a negative form of the same statement, which can be easily rejected or accepted after testing. Okay, now why do we so research hypothesis is statement like there is relationship between intelligence and adjustment among Pune University students. So I'm conducting research on Pune University students. I want to see whether high intelligence, high adjustment, low intelligence, low adjustment, average intelligence, average adjustment. This is what I want to state. So that is my hypothesis. There is relationship between intelligence and adjustment of Pune University students. Okay, so this hypothesis I can make. Now, how can I test it? I cannot test it. Why I cannot test a positive statement? Because even if one particular student has high correlation and all have negative, I cannot draw any conclusion. Hence, we have to convert a research hypothesis into a negative form, a negative form, that is a null hypothesis, where we make the statement there is no significant difference in the scores between, there's no significant difference in the relationship between intelligence intelligence and adjustment of Pune University students. So when I say there's no significant difference in the scores of intelligence and adjustment, what am I trying to do? I'm going to find out the intelligence score. I'm going to find out the adjustment score, and then I'm going to see whether there is any correlation, whether there's a significant correlation. Significance, how do I say? Then I'll say whether it is significant at 0.01 level or significant at 0.05 level, or whether it is high correlation or whether it is low correlation. So if it is high correlation, I said it is significantly correlated. When there's low correlation, below average, and it is very low, then I say it is not correlated. Okay, so this is how a hypothesis tested, only when it is converted into a null form. Okay, I think I just okay. One more thing I want to tell about objectives of the study. I'm coming back, because this particular question was asked to me when I spoke to another group just 2 or 3 days back. There was one participant in that particular group had a tremendous problem about objectives of the study, because she was doing research in education itself, and she had a lot of problems. Her problem was, when do we write the research question? In her PhD thesis, she was asked to write the research questions and not the objectives of the study. First thing I told her was, objectives of the study are generally written in the subject of education and in the discipline of education. In social sciences, usually we write research questions in history, in geography, in psychology, and sociology. They write research questions. So the same objective which we write in the statement form is converted into the question form in the case of social sciences. So I asked her whether her thesis research is on education or in social sciences. She said her research is in education. Then she came to the problem. Her research is on case study. Now, case study research design we have got from psychology. Because it is coming from psychology, she has to frame research questions and not objectives of the study. She has framed, her research guide has asked her to frame research questions. There's no harm. I said, go ahead and have research questions in the study. Only there you can study, you can say to study the students something, to study the students something else. Here in the objectives of the study, we always like to find out, to compare, to see relationship. These are the adjectives or the adverbs that we use in the case of adverbs that we use in the case of objectives of the study. There are about 17 or 18 objective verbs that can be used that I had identified once. So if you go to different theses, you can go through the various ways of writing the objective to develop a particular program, to find out, etc. So to see relationship, there are many of it. Okay. Now, sorry, I came back because there was confusion in one student. I don't want this group to have any confusion, whether we have to write objectives or research questions. So if it's a case study, go ahead and write. If it is not case study, then if it write objectives, a straight statement in a positive statements in the case of education. Assumptions I explained to you, hypothesis I explained to you, write it in a testable form. Then delimitations of research. Now the question is asked whether every research needs a hypothesis. Hypothesis is required in research wherever there are variables and it has to be tested. In experimental research, yes, you need to test certain hypothesis. You need to test certain variables. When you need to compare or to find relationship, etc., you will have to you have to write the hypothesis and go ahead with testing. So if it is, for example, a research where you're just exploring something, maybe you need not write any hypothesis. After you write the hypothesis in the introduction, you have to write the delimitations. Be very clear. What is delimitations? delimitations of the research is written not only in the research report, but also written in your research proposal. Okay, why do we write the delimitations of your study in the research proposal also? Delimitation of the study is what? The statements that we make where we curtail or restrict our research, restrict the conduct of research uh, in a particular way, so that because we have limited time. So to do PhD, you have only 3 years. To do MPhil, you have 2 years. To do MEd, now we have 2 years. Okay, now you have 2 years or 3 years. If you have a research project, again, you have 6 years. So you decide on which time. So within the time limit, you have to do your research. And one more thing, remember, like to form an intelligence theory, to develop an intelligence theory, Jean Piaget. Jean Piaget took how many years? He did 60 years of research to develop his theory. We do not have time to develop 60 years to do your PhD. So what will happen? You have to do research in a limited time. So what do? You cannot collect data from the whole world. You cannot collect data from whole of India. You cannot go and collect data in 3 years from the whole of Maharashtra. So what do? We delimit the sample itself. We also delimit not only the sample, but also certain other factors. Okay, now all the variables, for example, even if I have adjustment, if I take a simple variable like adjustment is a topic, there are hundreds of types of adjustment that a human being makes in his life. Like if you go and see Mangal in his research, you have the Mangal's adjustment inventory. Now adjustment test actually. In his adjustment scale, what has he done? He has covered only 5 intelligence. His score. One is his social adjustment and home adjustment and economic adjustment. Only 5. Some of the 5 of them he has taken. Every theorist will take only some things which he can cover in a limited time. So whatever it is, your attitude. You're talking of attitude. Which attitude are you? Attitude towards money are you investigating, or attitude towards education are you investigating? What is it that you're delimiting your research on? Because if you're doing research, if you're not writing your delimitation, you're doing research on attitude of economic attitude, and the examiner who is reading is thinking of a social attitude, he will say your thesis is rubbish. So that is the reason why delimitations has to be very clear on what you're doing, exactly delimited and informed. So I will say the study is restricted to only sample drawn from Pune city. Okay, so I'm not going to draw sample from everywhere. I'm going to draw sample from Pune city 8th standard students. So not all the 8th standard in Pune city I can't. So what do I say? I further delimit to 8th standard students of English medium schools. Now all the English medium schools will be lakhs of students. I cannot go there. So I'll say English medium aided schools. And after I identify English medium aided schools, then I'll say I will collect data from only 50% of the students. So do you know how we come down to a sizable sample which will represent a population, and where you can draw a representative sample and still draw a valid conclusion to the population you have drawn the sample from. So delimitation in geographical area, in terms of the sample, and also in terms of time. Within 2 years you have to do, hence you have to draw. Now if you have lot of money, like maybe a research project you've got lakhs and lakhs of money, you can have research assistants and go and collect data from the whole world, or from whole of India. But no, you are supposed to do the research yourself. You cannot have research assistants to go and do research, collect data, and come and submit your PhD thesis. You have to collect your data yourself. You're supposed to analyze your data yourself, write your thesis yourself. Don't outsource all these things. Okay, you can take the help of for analysis, statistical analysis, but acknowledge it duly. Don't give money and do get it things from others. So delimitation of the study should be very clear what you're delimiting it. Then we will know that you're an honest researcher and you have done the research yourself, because the degree you are getting yourself for doing the research, finding out the truth. Research means search for truth. So if it is search for truth, don't do anything that is dishonest for research. Now, scope of research. Scope of research is whatever research data you have collected, you are generalizing it to the, you have collected data from a sample, representative sample from the population. So you are going to test only that sample. So whatever results you get, you are going to generalize it to the population. So all the scope of your research is actually is extended only to the population of your study, population of Pune city. Okay, so if you cannot say the scope of my research is extended to India, because if somebody does research in some other part of India, the results may be totally different. The attitude, aptitude may be totally different. So the scope is always, it is where you generalize to the population. Sometimes, only in one case, this example I always give, only in one PhD thesis, only in one PhD thesis all over the world, from existent time till now, only one PhD thesis, the research result, the research conclusion is universal. The scope is universal, that his conclusion is applicable to the whole world, to every part of the world. His thesis is, this thesis is by Kohlberg. Kohlberg has done his research, PhD research on moral developmental theory, moral development. His moral development conclusions was applicable to the whole world from that time till now. Hence, it is called as moral developmental theory by Kohlberg. He gave the 6 stages of moral development. It is very, very relevant today to every part of the world. So our research is that every research that is done is not applicable to everybody, except for example, applied research, specific applied research. For example, if somebody has there's a pest on a particular crop there's a pest on a particular crop, and in one pot in India, in one researcher conducts research on that pest on that particular crop, and he invents a pesticide for that. So when he has discovered or invented a pesticide to kill the pest for that particular crop, his conclusion is applicable to every part of the world. Wherever that crop is and wherever that pest is there, this particular pesticide can be used. Then his scope is universal. So remember, whatever conclusion we are drawing for a study is generalizable from the sample to the population we have drawn. Only if your conclusion is applicable to the whole world, then you say it is universal. Then there is a sample, there's a population, then you have universe. So when the scope goes to the universe, then it becomes a theory. But it takes years and years to do theory, but none of the PhD research other than Kohlberg's has become a theory. All the theories that are developed by various theorists are done after doing their PhD, maybe for years together, like Piaget's intellectual developmental theory for 60 years of research he has done. So scope of research, remember how you should be writing. Then significance. Significance of research is nothing but significance of research is how important is your research. Now, how important is your research to whom? Now, if you have conducted your research, on students, on teachers, on school, then naturally the results of your study will be useful to students, for the teachers, and for the parents of whomver you have conducted. So significance of the research is relevant to the person you have conducted your data on. Significance of your research will be useful to the government only if you have done a policy study, a government policy. On the government policy, if you have done some research, only then it will be significant to the government. So don't give recommendations to the government when you have not done any policy study. So chapterization is another next part of the introduction. The next part of introduction is the chapterization. Whenever you end the first chapter, you write what are the things that go in the further in the other chapters. Further things that goes in the other chapters are like chapter 1 is this. In two lines you can explain. Chapter 1 is such and things are there. In chapter 2, such and such a things. The chapter 3 is devoted to plan and procedure. Chapter 4 is devoted to analysis and interpretation. And chapter 5 is summary and conclusion. This is what you can write the chapterization in 1 or 2 sentences. Remember one thing, every chapter should have lastly a concluding remark. You need to conclude what is followed in the next and tell, conclude and tell what is followed in the next chapter. Concluding remark will be the next chapter, the following chapter will be on review of related literature and researches. Okay, yeah. Now review of related literature and researches. This is their chapter 2. See how chapter 2 is written. It is in Roman capital 2 capital I. So that is called chapter 2nd. It is not 2, but it is chapter 2nd. In words, it is SEND. Otherwise, it is Roman capital letters, capital I. That is chapter 2nd. Okay. Now, why do I use the word review of related literature and researches? I've used 2 different words. Now, people write review of related literature and put in all researches. Sometimes they write review of related researches and put in books also. So there's a slight difference, a very subtle difference, which I think as researchers, all of us should know. Okay, that is why I make it a point for you to make it a point to explain to whenever I give a talk. Now, what is literature? Literature is everything that you read in books that are published. Okay, published by some publisher. Okay, not anything that newspaper is not called literature. Any article in magazine is not called literature. Literature is that is published by a responsible publisher. Okay, so now who publishes a responsible publisher? What will he publish? Now related, why have I used the word related literature? So if I'm going to do research on my topic is related to variables of interest and attitude. So all the books all the books theories that are there are given in the books on interest, that are given in the books on attitude, that is kept in the library. So I have to go to the library and refer to every book, each and every book that I can lay my hands on interest, on attitude, if those are the variables that are there in my topic of research. So all the books I have to read. Now, when I say literature, now literature, each person will write differently. For example, one example that I always give is somebody will write a book on globalization. All those people, all the writers with right ideology, they will write a book on globalization. They will say globalization is very useful for the country. It is very good for everyone. Now, actually, globalization is very good for the industrialists and the private sector. Globalization is very useful for them, the private sector so what happened? The leftist or people of the left ideology, they are against globalization. So what with the person with the right ideology who wants to promote the right ideology, he will write a book on with correct illustrations, with correct examples. He will write a book on how globalization is good and useful for society. A person with left ideology, who are a union leader, a trade union leader, will write a book on globalization, how it is harmful for the government sector, for the public sector. So in globalization, privatization is very important. It is very useful for industrialists. So the trade union leaders will say how harmful it is for the society, how it will affect all the workers, the laborers, labor sector. It will be affecting. He will write a book and say how how the globalization is bad for the society. Now, you as a researcher, if you are going to do research on globalization, what are you supposed to do? You have to go and read all the books on globalization, which says pro-globalization, that is how globalization is good. And you also have to read all the books that says that how globalization is bad. You have to have the examples of how it is good and bad. You as a researcher have to do this particular review. Now, these people are not telling lies. They are telling the truth, but they are telling the truth from different angles, from their experience, and also from their vested interest. So the one who want to promote privatization, he will sell all the public enterprises and convert it into private enterprises. He will sell everything to the industrialists, okay, for his own vested interest. So this is what you have to read, both the pros and cons, the negative and the positive aspects. You have to read. And then as a researcher on globalization, you have to go and collect data from the public. You have to collect your own data, and then you have to analyze your data, and you have to, whatever findings you get, whether you find the findings as so many people say it is good and so many people feel that it is bad, you have to honestly present your conclusion in the thesis. And when at the time of discussion, you have to say, so many people who say it is good for the country or good for the society, it is in concurrence with the literature of such and such a person who say that globalization is good. In the discussion part in the last chapter, you can say these people we have found that these people, so many percentage of the people find that globalization is bad for the society, and this is in concurrence with the researchers or from the literature of these people who say that globalization is bad for the country. So this is how a good conclusions is drawn and discussions are held. So review is very important. Reviewing the books of positive and negative aspects of the same variable you have to do. So literature are all the books that has been published, and it is truly published. So no publisher will publish something fake unless somebody has done research, and he has done, or even without research. Even now, literature is again of two types. You can do research and you can write a book, and that is after you do your PhD thesis, you can convert your PhD thesis in the form of a book. Then this particular literature is totally research based book. Okay, that is one. This book is literature which is research based. There's also another literature which is not based on research, but is based only on one's own thinking, logical thinking, and by one's own experience. Again, the same example I will be giving you. One example that I give is, I have worked in the university department in Shivaji University for nearly 27 to 28 years. Now, when I worked there, I must have had very good experiences, okay, for whatever reason. I must have, not because I think positively, maybe because I really had the opportunity and I got good opportunities and got good experiences. When I write a book on the Department of Education, I will write a book saying that it is a very good department and it allows you to grow from assistant professor to a professor, and you get so many opportunities. And at the same time, if there was another assistant professor, and unfortunately he or she did not get opportunities to grow and remained in the same status for whatever reasons, when she writes a book, she will write a book on how it does not help you to grow. There are not many good opportunities in the department. Whatever she has written a book on is 100% true. And whatever I have written is 100% true, but those are at the same point of time, both have written exactly the opposite, and that is out of one's own experience. Now, this is also literature based on experience and one's own logical thinking. Now, this is also, it is not fake, it is true. So it becomes literature. Now, as a researcher, you are supposed to refer to all the literature, write, negative or positive, and from that you draw some understanding, and you collect your own data and you relate it to the literature, and then you come out with some discussions, how people are, what the literature says and what your finding says. Okay, then you can draw some conclusions. Okay, this is the importance of literature. Literature are all the books that is done, written by doing research or without doing research, out of one's own experience or one's own logical thinking, without doing any research. Okay, then if that is related literature, then what is researches? Researches are purely those documents that are research based. Like after doing research, you publish research articles in research journals. So the research papers are research. So when you do review, you have to do review of literature and researches. You have to do review of related researches of in research journals, whatever research paper is published related to interest. If that is your variable, then all those articles you have to refer. You have to also review all the articles related to this thing on all the PhD thesis related to interest. Now, related to interest, there may be other variables for other researches. When you write the review, which is very interesting, when you write the review of literature in a paragraph form, what you're expected to do is, you need not say that particular PhD in another person in his PhD thesis, besides interest, he has got many other conclusions. What you can say is, besides other conclusions of this researcher, the conclusion related to interest, he has found that, you can say, and whatever conclusion he has drawn related to research, only that particular conclusion you can write in the paragraph, or when you write the review in your chapter on related literature and review. So researches are what? The PhD thesis, MPhil dissertations also is a part of your research review. PhD thesis is part of your research review. Also your, what do you call that, research projects funded by UGC, by ICSSR and other funded agencies, only those research projects are called as, can be taken as review of related researches. If somebody has done research and it is not published and it is not funded by anybody, it is not a part of review of related research. Please remember that. So out of interest, with nobody has funded and it has not been examined by anybody, to increase the number of research projects, if somebody has done, please don't accept it as a part of review. Your examiner will reject it. Okay, so be very clear. And so what is related literature and researches, I've explained. Now, what do you write in the thesis? The basic contents of this review chapter, I'm going to tell you. The basic contents of the research review of related literature and researches are, there is an introduction. Every chapter requires an introduction. So what do you write in the introduction? Why there is a need to review in research, need for review in research. Whenever we do research, we do review of related literature and researches. Why do we do this review? If we do not review related literature and researches before we start doing your research, what will happen? You will end up taking a topic which is already done by somebody in some other part of the world. If you repeat this research, it is no more called search for truth. Search for new truths. So you cannot, already if somebody has searched a truth, then you cannot find out new truths. So there is nothing like repeating a truth and calling it new truth. So that is why review of related literature and researches are done, to find out that there's a gap in research. Nobody has done this research in this part of the world or anywhere in the world. Hence, I've taken up this particular research to find a gap in research and take up a research topic. We do the research. This you have to write in the introduction. It is very important for us to review literature and researches in research, to find a gap in research, to choose an appropriate topic. And after choosing the topic, it is very important to review all the studies thoroughly to find out the appropriate tools used in research and the research design they have developed, so that I can develop an appropriate tools and appropriate research design for this particular thesis. And in the thesis, why you should write the review of related literature and researches, it is essential. You have to justify why you have to write review the second chapter. You have to justify why you have to write the second chapter, because if you don't write the second chapter, the examiner will think you have not done any review at all. If you have not done review, you have to give the number of review you have done in the chart form. Many of the theses, good theses that are done these days, especially in Pune and Bombay and all, they have given a wonderful chart. A chart is given after the introduction where it shows the number of books you have referred uh, for while doing this PhD thesis, number of books you have referred, number of research papers you have referred in the journals, and the number of researchers, PhD researchers and research projects. MPhil you can refer, but not MEd or any other research. Okay, it is reviewed. Conducted in India, you can classify it as conducted in India and conducted abroad. And you can also classify further in the chart as directly related review of researchers and indirectly related review of researchers. Like, for example, I'm developing a computer multimedia software for school science textbook. I can have indirectly related review of computer multimedia software developed for mathematics, okay, instead of science. So in mathematics is my indirectly related research. So a chart is presented showing, then your examiner, your evaluator knows how much of literature you have reviewed, how many good papers you have gone through, or is it sitting at home and then writing some from the previous researchers, you have just copied something. It can easy, if somebody has copied, any good examiner, a good evaluator, an expert can easily see that whether it is copied from somewhere or you have done the work yourself when they see this chart and when they see your introduction. Okay, so in the review of related literature and researches chapter second, you have to write a small introduction, then give the chart. After that, you have to write the variables considered for the review. So variables considered for the review are interest, attitude, aptitude, whatever is there. You will be writing the number of variables that are considered for review. Accordingly, after you write the variables considered for review, presentation of review of related literature, that is books, you will be giving variable wise, like all the books that you review you have of books you have done on the different theories, like what Ising says on intelligence, what Cattell says on intelligence, what somebody else says on intelligence, all that, what are their definitions, everything will be coming. You will be presenting the review of related literature on a particular variable. So variable number 1, part 1, variable number 2, interest, part 2, all the review you will be presenting variable wise. Then also review of related researches, PhD thesis, and again you have to classify and present separately all the researches that are done in India and abroad. PhD thesis, research publications in research journal, research project report. Then you have to do presentation of research, review of whether it is literature or review of related researches. I have not written here, but listen carefully. You have to always present it in a what do you call that? You have to present it year-wise, starting from the past to the present. Okay, from the past to the present. So 1948 research book, then 1958 book, then 68. So similarly, in the researches also, somebody has Mathur has done in 1944, then on variables, on intelligence. Then somebody has done on 1988, then 1998. So the presentation of research is always done in a chronological fashion from past to the present. Only then we can draw a trend. Okay, that we have to study the trend of research review over the chronological years. So I can, in the same review of chapter, I have to write the trends observed in the research review. I will see that in the literature, I find that a lot of studies earlier were done on adolescence emotional aspect, and then maybe in the 30s, all on emotions as turmoil. Maybe in 1980s, all the intelligence, all the studies on intelligence on adolescence were on their intellectual development. So you can always draw a trend on how people have done research on. Even when you study this researches, when you review the researches that you have written in your thesis in a chronological manner, you can say in 1940s, the trend was mostly on questionnaire, tools were questionnaire. In 1980s, we find that most of the researchers have used interview as a technique. And earlier, all the theses, if you remember, all theses were on qualitative analysis. Later on, quantitative analysis became the trend. Everything was quantified. Everything was on quantitative analysis. Then again, we are going for qualitative analysis. Now all the recent researches on mixed research designs, mixed research methods are used, and there is also mixed analysis of both quantitative and qualitative analysis. Both are done, and a complete research is done on a particular topic. So these are the trends. Whatever you have observed over the chronological years, maybe you can group it into 5-year period, that special characteristic in 5 years, and then special characteristics in the next 10 years or next 16 years. Classify it, study it. Then you say that you're a good researcher. You have understood what research is. So this any examiner can make out from the way you have written that you have analyzed the research and you have drawn the trends. Okay. In the same chapter 2, you write the frame of reference of the study. You say this particular topic that you have chosen for the study, nobody has done this research earlier. Maybe some of the variables are done by researcher in a different context, in a different perspective. But in this research, these variables are clubbed together and done in this particular context, and no one has done this research study earlier. So uniqueness of this research problem that you have chosen, you have to justify. Now, this is very important, because when we as evaluators, when any evaluator sees what is the uniqueness, we have to answer to 2 questions when we evaluate a PhD thesis or a doctoral research. First question that is asked is, what is the contribution of your research to the subject of education or to the subject that you're studying? So uniqueness of your research problem, your significance of research, the evaluator can, if you have written it correctly and properly, the evaluator can easily spot it. Now, after you write the uniqueness of this research problem, then you write the concluding remark. As I told you, every chapter requires a concluding remark, and here you have to write what was the special characteristics of this chapter, and why. And you can say the following chapter is related to plan and procedure. So that is how you conclude. Now I come to chapter 3, plan and procedure. There's an introduction. To every chapter has an introduction. In this introduction, what are you writing? You have to justify why plan and procedure is required in research and why it is required to be written in this PhD thesis. Now, plan and procedure, as all of us know, even if we have to build a house, build a school, build a hospital, the plan and procedure will change. Okay, so the plan and procedure to build a house is different, and the plan and procedure to build a hospital is different. To plan and procedure to build an educational institution is totally different. Now you have to justify your particular research, how you plan it. If there is no, what is the plan and procedure? Plan and procedure is nothing but the blueprint of a house, blueprint of a building. So plan and procedure is the blueprint of your research, how you start your research, how you will conduct your research, and how you will conclude and report your research. All this is essential. You have to write how you have started your research, how you planned and how you did your research, And this you have to justify why it is necessary and why it is necessary in this thesis. It is necessary in this thesis because if you do not write the plan and procedure, I will imagine a different plan and procedure and I will say your thesis is wrong when I try to evaluate. So if you write your plan and procedure, I will fall on your thinking lines. I will put my thinking pattern on your thinking lines, and you would have justified your way of thinking, and I will say, okay, you can do this research in this way also. Otherwise, I will have a different plan in my mind from that particular topic. I will give you one example here. There was a topic of research that was done in Goa University, and I was one of the, not only the examiner, but for PhD Viva. Similarly, another examiner from Gulbarga had come, and he was to evaluate the thesis, and he was also for the PhD Viva OC. There were two in Goa University. And in Goa University, it was a thesis on education, and the topic was very interesting. And the topic, he had done it from the psychological angle, and all the objectives of the study were from the psychological point of view. Unfortunately, in Goa at that point of time, the dean of research was some from philosophy. The dean of research is one of the committee member for the Viva OC there, and the man stood his ground and said, this topic research cannot be done this way. All the objectives are wrong. This topic can be done from the philosophical angle by these objectives. Then we as examiners from education, as evaluators, we stuck our ground and said, this particular boy has done his research from the psychological perspective, and every objective of his is correct. Yes, he could have done from the philosophical angle also, and that would have been another research from a different angle. And we both had to justify and say his objectives are there, and he has clearly told in his delimitation that he has not done his research from any other angle. So if you have delimited it and told very clearly, this is from this angle only, then nobody can reject your thesis. At the time of Viva OC, this happened, and luckily we were there to justify. Sometimes it can go wrong also. So that is the reason why you have to justify your plan and procedure, and the way in the thesis also. So the person reading your thesis and evaluating will know exactly how you went about, and then he can say, yes, you are right. Okay. So research methodology, you have to, after you introduce, you have to write the research methodology, whether it is a quantitative research or whether it is qualitative research or is a mixed research or whether it is multi-stage research. You know what you have done. Please be very clear about this, because as I told you, every research can be done from different angles or different ways, but you have to justify why you have done this from the quantitative angle only, why you have done from the qualitative angle, or why you have used mixed research methodology, or why you have used multi-stage. In the beginning, you have done a qualitative research and collected some data. Then you have a part of research is quantitative at a different stage, and you have collected data. Again, you had to reconfirm. So you went in third stage qualitative. You can have multi-stage research. Mixed research is both quantitative and qualitative at the same time from the same or a different population. Okay, so this multi-stage research, mixed research design methodology, please be very clear, and you have to justify. Here it is not a place to explain what is quantitative, that is written in the book, what is qualitative. Here is the place to justify what is, if you have used quantitative, what is quantitative and why you have used this quantitative research for your objectives of your research. You have to justify that. Then you write the research design. There are many, if you have to write, if it is an experimental method you have used, then in the experimental method, you have different experimental designs. You have one group design, rotational method. You have one group of students, and on the one group, what you do, you have, you study You conduct one method, and then on the same group you do you study using use it as a control group, and then you experiment on the same group, and then you test the one group, the same one group design or rotational method. Or you can have two group method, that is you have a experimental group and separate control group. Or you can have the pre-test post-test method. You have different research designs in the same research methodology. In experimental method, you have different experimental designs. Similarly, in historical method, you have different historical design. So every research methodology may have different research design. You as a researcher, for which topic you have chosen, you should be very clear. Study, study, study. Read books. Don't depend only on your research guide. Research guide is an expert on her thesis, on his own thesis. Your research topic is new. It is a joint venture by you and your research guide. You both are jointly probing into a new research topic. Hence, be open-minded. Don't expect the research guide to dictate things to you or somebody else to write your thesis. Do the research, do a lot of review of related literature. You can learn everything from review, what you can do. And please buy, if you are a PhD student, please buy, or even if you're a research guide, please buy heart John Beston Khan, by heart C.R. Kotari. If you have by hearted these two books, I think you can become a wonderful guide. And also for qualitative research, you have to, I just forgot the name. I will come at the end of the talk, I may be able to tell you. Now, so all these certain books are there, which as researchers, all of us have to literally by heart. Once we are good, then we can become better research guides too. But remember, every new research topic is a joint venture by the research guide and the by a research student. And it is the student's responsibility not only to go and collect data, but to design your research, do the research in an appropriate manner. The guide is there only to help you whenever you have a doubt, when you have some problem. Don't expect the guide to do all your research and give you. Okay, research designs. There are many research designs. You have to say which is your research design. I've seen thesis while evaluating that people write which are the different research designs that are there, that is given in John Beston Khan. No, we are not interested. We all evaluators and examiners have studied all that. We know what it is. What we are interested in knowing is whether you know what you have done. So if you have chosen a particular research design, write what is that research design that is given theoretically in the book, and then you say why you have chosen that particular design and how that research design is appropriate for your topic of research, how it is useful to collect data. Then you come to the sample design. So why is your sample design most appropriate? There are different sampling designs. And why is the sample design, whether you've chosen the cluster sampling design, why did you use a cluster sampling design? Because you had different groups with different characteristics. So you could not draw random sampling because it would have affected your representation of the sample. So what your representation of the population. So what do you do when you have different groups with different characteristics? Then you have to group them and you have to form clusters of different groups. From each group, you'll have to draw a sample. Then you have a cluster sampling design. Similarly, if you have to collect data from different parts of a city or different parts of a district or different stages. Then you can have a stratified sample also. From different strata, a particular sample size you can use. So you can have different types of sampling design. So which is the sampling design you have used? Explain there. Then you explain why this sampling design is the most appropriate to draw for this study from this population to make it most representative. You have to justify and say that. Sample size. Sample size is very, very important to say. Now, sample size, the students ask, how much should I take? Should I take 400, 500, 600? It depends on your population. It depends on your population, and it depends on how to draw the sample size also. It is given in books. Please refer to it and how you have to draw an appropriate representative sample. For experimental design, it is different. For survey, it is different. For qualitative researches, it is different. So it is most appropriate that you and your research guide sit together and refer the books and draw a particular representative size for the population. Otherwise, you cannot draw generalization. So sample size should be appropriate, it should be representative also. So it should be adequate. It cannot be less. So your experimental size, the least that you can take is 40, 40. But if your population is very large, then you have to go for larger sample size. So that is why it is very important to be very knowledgeable about this. So don't refer to previous researches and go as it is. So study and do your research yourself. It is guide's responsibility also to see that the student studies things by himself and not refer to previous researches and go ahead. Nature of the sample. This is very important. That is never given in any of the books which I usually explain to the students. Nature of the sample, it is very, very important to write. Like if you're drawing it is most commonly nature of the sample that is written by the research students, whether it is from the urban area or from the rural area. True, whether it is from the urban area or rural area, it is very obvious the results can differ drastically. The conclusions can differ drastically. If you have drawn sample from a rural area and the examiner is from the urban area, and nowhere in your thesis the word rural area is there, the examiner reading your thesis will have urban students in the mind and say, all rubbish, this is a fake data. Hence, it is very necessary that you write from where you have drawn the sample. Another one example that I will be giving you is, like, for example, I have drawn the sample from very rural area in Kolhapur, rural village near Kolhapur, where there is not a single computer in that small village. And then I try to study the students' computer awareness ability. If I conduct a questionnaire and study that, I will get almost nil computer awareness. And if I send that paper to Delhi examiner, the Delhi examiner, without writing the nature of the sample, the Delhi examiner will say this is rubbish, because every student at this stage will have at least so much of computer awareness. So it is a fake data. So if I had written in my delimitations, or if I had written in my nature of the sample, this sample is drawn from a very rural village where there's not a single computer, only awareness of computer is by what is heard from here and there. So naturally the computer awareness of the student is very low. If I had written it somewhere there, then the conclusion that I had drawn from my questionnaire will be accepted by the evaluator as 100% correct, because you have written all the steps correctly. Hence, it is like if I do some research related to quality of a particular thing, and then I would write, if I'm collecting data from Kolhapur city, I will say it is a rich sugar belt. So the attitude of people in the rich sugar belt, which is a patriarchal society, if I conduct it on girl students and I get a particular data, I should write there very clearly that is a patriarchal society and it is from a very rich sugar belt. This is the way people think. So if my result is this, it just my nature of sample which I have written justifies my conclusion. Otherwise, it will never justify my conclusion. Be very clear about the nature of the sample, whether it is very high socioeconomic status, low socioeconomic status, rich belt, poor belt, dry area, rural, urban, or deprived. All this is extremely important for you to write for nature of sample in your chapter 3. Then tools of research. Tools of research, if you have used standardized tools, yes, you have to write which is the standardized tool you have to write. And in very briefly on the scoring method, you can write what is the scoring method that you have used. But there is a rule now, because of plagiarism and because of copyright issues, the standardized tool manual cannot be explained. Detailed explanation of the standardized tool cannot be and should not be given in your thesis, even in the chapter 3 or in the appendices. Only you can see this is a standardized tool I have used, and this is the scoring procedure they have given. Details of the standardized tool, because standardized tools are meant to be sold. So they have a copyright issue and you will be held up as in the copyright problem. So tools, if it's standardized tools, if you do, just explain it and you can write the scoring procedure used and you explain. But if your objective is to develop a particular tool for research, for development of a intelligence test by the investigator, then you say the investigator tool prepared by you and your research guide, and then you say this particular tool, name the tool, student intelligence for students of a particular area. Then name this and then explain this in detail. Here you have to give whatever that is given in a manual. For example, you have to give the full questionnaire because it was your objective. Because it is your objective, the full tool has to be given along with the scoring procedure. Every detail of the tool should be given in this particular chapter. Okay, then procedure of data collection. After you write all the tools that you have to use for tools that you have used for collecting data, procedure of data collection. There's in one particular book I had read a very good book, which said that whenever you collect data, you have to follow a particular procedure. One particular test has to be given earlier, and then it should be followed by another particular test. Otherwise, what happens is there could be a clash of thinking, and you cannot get a correct answer. You have to form this procedure of data collection is very important. Usually, the researcher knows which tool should be given first and which tool should be given later. But when in a research project, what happens is we have a lot of research assistants, and they tend to mess up with it. They give a wrong tool first, and then they give another tool. Then what happens is the data collected, you will get a wrong data because there could be repetitions, and one tool may give a clue to the another tool, and then you can have a wrong data may be collected. So procedure of data collection should be explained. Here is the place where you as a researcher have to give a chart you have to give for when you went to which institution, on which date you went, and from where you collected, which tool you administered. Suppose on 23rd you went to on 23rd March, you went to this institution and collected data. You write there 23rd, this institution, intelligence test. On 24th, this institution, personality test. 24th, 25th, this institution, this test. And then on 26th, on another institution, intelligence test. So you have to write when the different tests were collected from different. This particular chart should be kept procedure in the procedure of data collection, how you went and collected data, how you administered, what are the precautions you took while administering the tool. All that has to be clearly explained in the procedure of data collection, how you went and collected, what is the care that you took, what is the control, the measures that you took while collecting the data, whether you collected the data yourself or you took the help of the class teacher. So whether you had even conducted a pilot study for data collection on another sample, and then you had used the terminologies that were that could not be understood, whether you had used the translated language for the terms there. So whatever you have done for procedure of data collection should be explained very clearly in the procedure of data collection. Then the examiner will not have any doubt whether you have done this data, collected the data, or whether you have collected it properly or not. Then method of data analysis. Once you have collected the data, we keep all the data on a table. And then what do? We analyze the data. The analysis of data, what have you used? Suppose my objective is to find out the intelligence of students. Then what is my tool? Stanford Binet intelligence test is my tool. Then I have got some scores. I've got the scores for each student. I've got the raw data for each student. Then what is my method of data analysis? I've used the mean for girls, mean for boys, to find out find out the intelligence of students, of girls. So that was one of my objective. I say the mean scores of intelligence for girls of this sample is this and such a thing. The mean score for boys of intelligence is such and such a thing. Then my third objective is to compare the boys and girls, to find out whether there's a difference in significance difference, whether there is boys are better or girls are better in intelligence. What do I do? Then I do the analysis of a t-test. Between the mean scores of boys and girls, I take and do the method of analysis is to compare the boys and girls. My objective is to compare the boys and girls on intelligence. Okay, to compare the boys and girls on intelligence. So what is the method of analysis? This is my t-test. So for t-test, what I do, I use the mean scores of boys, mean scores of girls, and conduct a t-test, see the standard deviation, then conduct a t-test. And then what do I say? At 0.01 level, there is a significant difference, or there's a significant difference between boys and girls on intelligence at 0.05 level. And then I will say it is favoring girls or boys. Okay. Now that is the t-test is a method of analysis. Now you can have procedure of data collection can be qualitative or it can be quantitative. So method of analysis will be either quantitative or qualitative based on your method of data collection. Okay, and the tools that you have used for research for data collection. So tools you have used, tools of research you have used, the data collection procedure will be accordingly done, then method of analysis will be according. So selection of techniques of statistical techniques that you have used, t-test, mean, ST, mean, mode, ST, t-test, or if you have some correlation, you have to see the relationship between different variables, then you go for a correlation. Or if it is qualitative analysis, what are the techniques that you have used to analyze the data? Please write in your thesis very clearly. Then as the chapter third should also have a concluding remark, you have to say this chapter is followed by the next chapter, analysis and the interpretation of data. So analysis, interpretation, your analysis is done outside. Okay, you have done. What does this chapter contain? This chapter contains all the tables and graphs where the analyzed data is put in this chapter. So we have, in a simple words, we say analysis and interpretation of data chapter. So chapter 4. So part A is quantitative data analysis. You may have part A quantitative analysis and part B qualitative. If you have only quantitative analysis, don't write part A. If you have only qualitative analysis, don't write part A. If you have mixed, then you write part A, part B, and then draw the conclusion of the mixed research. So quantitative analysis, if you have, then you write an introduction, justify analysis and research. Why we have to analyze the research? Because we have to find the mean scores, and after finding the mean score, we have to either compare the scores or we have to see relationship among different variables in the study. So we have to analyze the data, see the correlations, compare it with, do the t-test or ANOVA, ANOCOVA, or even factor analysis. If you have to do the correlate many relationships you want to find out. So what is the place of research in this thesis? If you don't write the quantitative data, how will the examiner verify whether your conclusion that you have drawn is right or wrong, whether your interpretation is right or wrong? That can be justified only after studying your table and whether you have interpreted the data correctly and whether you have drawn the conclusion correctly. That can be seen only if you present it in this chapter. So justification that is required, justification for writing the analysis in this tables and graphs in this chapter is for everyone who is reading the thesis to check whether it is right or wrong and how this person has done his research, analyzed his data to get a solution to the problem he has chosen for research. That you have to write. Then you have description of statistical techniques used in the current research. Now, don't go and write all the statistics that are there in the statistical book. You write what are the statistics that you have used, whether it's the mean, median, mode, t-test, ANOVA, ANOCOVA, factor analysis, whatever you have used, and justify why you have used it. Now, after that, you will be writing objective-wise and hypothesis-wise presentation of data in tabular and graphical forms. Okay, objective-wise, I have my first objective. What was my first objective? To find out the intelligence of girls. Okay, so I have my first objective. I will have a table. Now, I will present my table of this thing, what uh, data, mean scores of intelligence of girls. Then I have another objective of this thing, what to find out the intelligence of boys. So I will present a table of mean scores of boys in the study. Okay, but if I have a third objective, is say to compare the boys and girls on intelligence, then I have a hypothesis. Then I will write the objective to compare the intelligence of boys and girls. Below that, that I have to write objective number 1, objective number 2, objective number 3. Objective number 3 to compare the intelligence of boys and girls on intelligence. Then I have a hypothesis for this particular objective. My hypothesis is there is no significant difference in the scores between boys and girls on intelligence. That is my null hypothesis. Because I made a null hypothesis, no significant difference in the mean scores of boys and girls on intelligence. Okay. Now, this particular null hypothesis I have to write. Below that, I will be giving a table. Inside, so what will be the table heading? The table heading, because I say no significant difference. So what will be the table title? The table title will be mean scores, t-test value, mean and t-test value of girls and boys on intelligence. Okay, this is what I will be writing on the title. So what goes into the table? The table will have serial number, and then I will have mean, t-test, and on the top row I will have mean scores. Then I have the mean and SD, and then I have the t-scores, and then I have the t-value at 0.01 level, significance 0.01 level, 0.05 level. So this is table, and then in the two rows I will be writing girls and boys. Thus mean scores of girls on top and the mean scores of boys on then the t value I will be writing, and then I will be writing at 0.05 level or 0.01 level whether it is significant. So I will be writing in that particular table. So how did we write the table title? I have written table number 1. And what have I written in the table title? Whatever is inside the table, I have written on top of the table as a table title. So this is how you will be presenting your objective-wise, hypothesis-wise presentation of data. Sometimes in one objective, I may have two hypotheses. So then you will have to write one objective, and you write hypothesis number 1 and hypothesis number 2. And then I will have hypothesis 1 number 1 table, and hypothesis number 2 another table. But one thing you remember, after you write the hypothesis and you write the table, immediately after the table you have to explain the table. Now how do I explain the table? I explain the table by two ways. One is I explain the table by observation. By general observation, I highlight the high scores and the low scores in the table, and that is that is only my observation, which has no statistical significance. Only the highs and low, maybe high intelligence and low socioeconomic status, and this particular group has high intelligence, this particular group has low intelligence, this group has. That is observation, which has no statistical meaning. Only when you do a statistical analysis like t-value, when you get, or you have a correlation, high correlation, low correlation, only then it is relevant. only then you can interpret. So then after the observation, you will be writing the interpretation. Interpretation is only based on the calculated value of T or the correlation or the factor analysis when you say all the relationship or the ANOVA value or ANOVA value, etc. Whatever statistical analysis you've done. So the interpretation will be, in the interpretation, what are you doing? You state your hypothesis, a null hypothesis again. This null hypothesis, null hypothesis states that there's no significant boys and girls on the C. But the T value in table number 2 shows that there is a significant difference between boys and girls at 0.01 level. Hence, this null hypothesis that there's no significant, hence the null hypothesis number 4, which says that no significant difference is rejected. Then we draw the conclusion. Then we interpret saying that there is a significant, we don't use the word significance again. Then you say there is difference between boys and girls favoring girls. Okay, because favoring girls, because that is what my data in the table shows. But the interpretation terminologies use the research language. If you're doing research, your English language is not important. It is your research language that is important. Correct research language. Your fancy English language will be dumped. It has to be correct research language. So even if it is repetitive, it doesn't matter. It should be accurate. Okay. So accurate interpretation language is language of the hypothesis, whereas the results that you do is from the results that you draw is from the interpretation. Whereas the language of the conclusion in the last chapter, in the summary chapter, is the language of the objective and not the hypothesis. Remember that. Again, I'll come to that later. I'll explain in more in detail. Okay, so presentation, this thing of the here in the interpretation, you will be writing in the interpretation hypothesis number 4 states such and such. There's no significant difference, but the value on table number 4 value shows that there is a significant difference in the T value at 0.05 level or 1 level, and it favors the girls. So the conclusion that the result that is drawn in the interpretation is the hypothesis number 4 is rejected, and the girls are better than boys, are more intelligent than boys. That is all I write and stop. Okay, so you have to write all your tables and graphs objective wise and hypothesis wise. If you don't have an hypothesis, then just write your objective and then write whatever you have found. Like if it is a qualitative analysis, okay, whatever you have done for the qualitative analysis, how you interpret. Then you have a graph, and graphical interpretation also can be done. Now table number, each table has a table number. And this table number, there are 2 ways of writing it. You can have a table number right from the chapter number 1 till the last chapter. Or you can have chapter-wise table number, chapter number 1. So table number 1 of chapter 1 will have table number first 0.1, table number first 0.2. So you can have the chapter 2 tables may have table number 2 or table number second 0.1, second 0.2. So chapter number and the table number may be written in some of the thesis. That you have to check again the latest APA style, and you have to go by that. So each table has a table number and a title. Title should cover every item that is inside the table and not which is not inside the table. As I told you, the mean scores, the median or the SD, and the T value. That was there, so I wrote the title like that. So that should be very, very clear. Then the table contents includes the items and statistically calculated values. So items of the table is the girls, boys, and you have the mean scores, the T value, and the statistically calculated value. It could be the T, it could be the correlation, ANOVA value, factor analysis value, whatever you have found. So this is how in chapter 4 you have to be presenting. Chapter 4, again, you have below each table, you have the observation. As I told you, highlights of the values in the table, high, low, etc. of a particular character. of a particular group. Then interpretation, state the hypothesis, compare the values in the table and state whether the hypothesis is accepted or rejected, and write the finding of the objective study. Results can be drawn at the end of this particular chapter. In points, give the results or findings of each table from the interpretation in the language of the hypothesis. This is how you can conclude. Now, part B of, if you have the mixed, if you have done part B as qualitative analysis, you follow all the steps that I told you. You write tables, you write graphs, write the interpretation, and then you draw the concluding remarks. Every chapter should have a concluding remark based on the results of the quantitative and qualitative analysis. Results, you draw some conclusions and state what is followed in the next chapter. You can say the next chapter, you have the summary and analysis. Chapter number 5th, FIFTH. That is why it is written in Roman number, capital Roman number 5. Okay, 5th. Now, summary, it is only called summary and conclusion. Don't write recommendations, suggestion, and all that there. It is understood. Okay, so summary and conclusion chapter, what does it contain? It contains an introduction on the first chapter. All the you have written this introduction, the first chapter in 2 pages or 3 pages or 5 pages, in any number of pages as per your requirement you have written. Whatever you have written, summarize, you precede, you summarize that particular introduction in your first chapter in 1 paragraph or at the most 1 page. Your summary of the first chapter should be in 1 page of the introduction part. Then after that, as given in the introduction chapter, copy the statement of the problem, need of the research, definition of the terms and phrases. Please write nominal definition, conceptual definition, and operational definition. If you miss writing the operational definition, you will be in great trouble by getting your thesis evaluated. So write your conceptual, and if you follow Ising's definition of Ising's tool, then write, I followed in this thesis, definition of Ising is intelligence is defined as per Ising, such and such a thing, and the tool of Ising is used. And whatever Ising's tool of intelligence measures is the intelligence of the sample. You have to write it very clearly. Objectives, copy it from the first chapter. Assumption, you copy from this first chapter. Hypothesis, copy from your first chapter. Delimitations, copy from the first chapter. One word is missing here, that is limitations of research. Limitations of research is very essential. What is the difference between delimitations and limitation? I think there's utter confusion in many students and many research guides too. Delimitation of research is something that is beyond the control of the researcher. Delimitation is what is totally under the control of the researcher. The researcher says, I have collected data only from such and such a sample. I've collected data only from Pune city. I'm collecting data only from such and such a group. So you have delimited because of shortage of, because of time limit and fund limit, etc. But the limitation of the research is something beyond the control of researcher. Suppose we at the beginning of delimitations, you have said, I'm going to collect data from 20 English medium schools, aided 20 English medium schools. I have, that is the final data I had drawn. That was my delimitation. But what happens is you are in the first year of your PhD, you are preparing your tools, you're doing so many other things. And then in the second year of PhD, you go to collect data. Out of the 20 students, that 20 schools you have identified, 2 schools have closed down. 2 schools have closed down, so you can collect data only from 18 schools. So the limitation of your research now is 18 schools, whereas your delimitation said it is 20 schools. So limitation of the study will affect your result. Suppose those 2 schools had very high intelligent students, or those 2 schools were from very low socio-economic status, or and one of your variable is related to it. What will happen is if the two schools were open, maybe all your results would have been different. They would have been different because these two schools, the result is affected adversely. So this could be, so you say the limitation of the researchers, the two schools had closed down beyond the control of the researcher. Limitation of this research, you will write only data was collected from 18 schools and not 20 as per the delimitation, since the schools had closed down. Okay, so limitation of the study, it is very essential to mention, because if the research, if your examiner thinks that the result is lopsided, you can justify it by the limitation, why you had not chosen the two. Now, delimitation of study could also be because we cannot control all the variables in the study. Whenever we do an experimental research, we control certain variables. But we also know there are thousands of variables affecting a student which we cannot control. For simple example is, for example, the socioeconomic status. Many times when we do research on two different groups of students, we say the same, they're identical in many ways, but socioeconomic factors we do not check. Maybe because if you're doing computer program development and you're trying to do research on computers, computer awareness or whatever it is, the low economic you have never studied the socioeconomic group of students, and if the experimental group is of so low socioeconomic group and your control group is of high socioeconomic group, naturally your results are going to be different. You never even thought of it that it could influence the research result, but it has affected. So limitation of the research is beyond the control of the researchers. If you know that is going to affect your research, then try to control it, study that, and make your research groups equal as much as possible. When you try to make two equivalent groups based on socioeconomic factor, based on intelligence, based on many factors, there may be some extraneous variable which you could not control, which could affect your study. So that is the reason why you have to write limitation of your research. Then the examiner knows, yes, if that is the reason why he got this conclusion for this particular topic, because the limitation could have affected the study. Because remember, your examiner has already read other theses, other research. It's maybe his student has done a similar research and he found a different result. Then, because of your limitation, you got a different result. Then he will say, yes, it is justified. His result is so drastically different because of the limitation of the study, which was beyond your control. So it is essential, after writing the delimitation, write the limitation. Then you have the scope of research. Scope of research is how far is your research applicable? As I told you in the beginning, the scope of research in the introduction itself, I told you, scope of research is how far can your conclusions be generalized. Since you drew a representative sample from a population, like you drew from Pune city, all for a small sample from a Pune city, all your generalization is applicable to Pune city Marathi medium students. So what happens is, but I can also extend the scope to, if the nature of the sample, if the same socioeconomic group is there and all are studying the same Marathi textbook in Solapur or Aurangabad, the results can be generalized to Solapur city and Aurangabad city or the whole of Maharashtra. Your conclusion can be, your scope can be extended to whole of Maharashtra if you have done an excellent, if your sample is very representative and you have done very good research design and sampling design, your scope can extend up to even the whole of Maharashtra, though you have collected data from only from Pune city. So as I told you, only one PhD research, the research is universal. Kohlberg's model developmental theory, which he did for PhD, his scope extended to the universe beyond the population of a study. That is why it became a theory. Okay. Now, significance of the study, as I told you earlier, it is significant to the teachers or students or to whomver it is. You can be significant to the government only if you have done some policy research. Like, for example, if you have conducted research on when English was introduced compulsory at the first in the 5th standard in Maharashtra state some years back. when my students were doing MPhil. So immediately they took up research for MPhil. What are the problems affecting the teachers and students and the parents and the school principal, headmaster, for having introduced suddenly in 5th standard in Marathi medium schools. So this research was taken up. Now this so whatever study we found was significant not only to the student, the parents, and the principal, but it was conducted somewhere near Kolhapur only. One small village he conducted, but he could send that result to the government saying, in this part of the village, all the schools have collected data, and these are the problems that I've observed. So whenever you make the policy, what are the problems that are there? If you know, then you can further rectify this problem in your next government meetings. You can take up these issues in your government meetings and so on. So only when you take up policy studies, only then you can make recommendations to the government. Otherwise, you cannot say. Just because you're studying some computer awareness in some college and you say the government should provide computer labs in colleges, it is wrong. Okay, you cannot make such statements. So only if it is a policy study, you can make suggestions to the government or recommendations to the government, or give your results to the government. They can appropriately decide what to do to benefit the schools in Maharashtra. So that is about the school significance. So whom it is useful for, it is. Methodology of research, as it is what you have done in your chapter 3, you write here. Sampling design as written in chapter 3. Sampling size, what you have written in chapter 3. Nature of sample, tools of data collection, statistical techniques used, procedure as you have written in chapter 3. You have to copy all that here. Why should you copy all that in there? Because we have used the word summary. Summary means, or summary part of this chapter means all the summary of the first 4 chapters. Many people do not have time to read your whole thesis. So what do? If your thesis is relevant to them, they first read your summary chapter. They know what is in the first 4 chapters. In your summary, they get everything. Suppose they find your research design is very interesting. What they do? They go to the research design chapter, the plan and procedure chapter, and study your research design. Suppose they find your analysis is very good, then they go to your analysis and interpretation chapter and study your chapter. So that is the reason why the title of this chapter is called Summary and Conclusion. The first part is the summary of the first 4 chapters in a very concise form. Then we come to the second term of this chapter, that is summary and conclusion. Conclusion of the research. This is the heart of your research. The whole research is your conclusion. Your conclusions of your research study is nothing but the solution of the topic that you have chosen for research. The topic of research, the results of the research is your conclusions that you're writing in this particular chapter. How do you write the conclusion? Based on the results in the 4th chapter. After the interpretation of the data, you have rejected your thesis or accepted your thesis. Then you have drawn the conclusions that there is significant difference between boys and girls in intelligence. In the conclusion, what was your objective? Your objective was to find out whether boys or girls are better in intelligence. If that is your objective, then you say girls are better than boys in intelligence. Girls are more intelligent than boys. More intelligence than boys. Boys, that's all you write. Okay, that is naturally understood that it is relevant for this sample and naturally for the population that we have studied. So conclusion is in language of the objective. So go back to the objective, and what was that? Write in that particular language. So whether it is correlation, whether there is relationship between intelligence and adjustment. If your finding is there is significant correlation between high intelligence and high what do you call adjustment, low intelligence and low adjustment, you can say yes, there is a relationship between intelligence and adjustment. That is all you will write. You will not write the significant number. All that is written in the results chapter. You will not write 0.01, it is better, it points, what do you call that, 44%. Some people have a very bad habit of writing 88%. In the conclusion, why should you write 88%, 64%, 74%? Write in the results? No. That is after the interpretation. In the result, you write 84%, 44%. In the conclusion, it is the result. It is the conclusion is the results of your study. There you write whether there is relationship, whether there is difference, relationship, favoring whom, no relationship. That's all you have to write. This is the solution to your problem. You have a topic called problem, a problem called topic of research, and you have found solutions to your problem. The solutions to the problem you have taken up for research is your conclusion. So don't write 84%, 24%. That shows high, low, that's all. That is there left to the analysis chapter and not to the summary conclusion chapter. It is not a good habit. Even then, people accept it because we can't keep rejecting a thesis for these minor errors and poor research reporting habits of people. Okay. Now discussion. Discussion is another heart of your research. You have found solutions to the problem which you have written in your conclusion. Discussion of the conclusion. We find very old nowadays, they are writing very good discussion. The young research guides and the young research students are doing wonderful job. I congratulate them. The discussions are more relevant today. Maybe people have understood it very clearly. When we explain it, they understand it very clearly. Discussion is not like computers are very important for research, computers are very important for students. All that is rubbish. What is the object of your study? What is the conclusion of your research? That is this, in this particular village, the computer awareness is very low. So in the discussion, you have to write in whichever study in literature, what did you see that in whichever, which author in which year in his study, he found that the poor students had poor computer awareness. So you can say 1948, 1958, 1968, this author in this year, they also found that the computer awareness of students were poor. But that is, this conclusion is in concurrence with the results of the study of conclusions of the study of these authors in this year. That's all you have to write in the discussion. And then you write the conclusions of this research that computer awareness is very low among the students is contradicting the research conclusions of these researchers. Then you write of Mathur 88, that one, this one, that one. You write in these researchers, they found the students' results, the computer awareness of students are very high. So what are the researches that agrees with your conclusion, and what are those researches that disagrees with your conclusion drawn in this study? This is the only thing you have to write in discussion. I want to know whether you discuss, why should we write discussion at all? That why so many researchers are in concurrence with the theory, that is the review of literature and researches. Why are these disagreeing with the conclusion of the previous studies? Discussion is very important to know whether your research conclusion that you've drawn is helping to build theories, because whether you have found out something new, if you have found out the result that are similar to the old studies, that means yet the society is still continuing in the same fashion. That is, in this village, the computer awareness is still very poor like the earlier cases. Suppose it disagrees and says the other, whereas in some cities they found the computer awareness of this age group is very high, then the next set of researchers will say, yes, in the cities they have found that computer awareness is very high. Why? What is the reason for computer awareness being high in cities than in rural villages? Because they have more computers there, more availability of computers, more, or maybe even their syllabus includes a part of computers. Computer labs are there, where they have computer facilities at home. There could be hundreds of reasons why those researchers found that computer awareness is high in their cities. So you can always justify. So how does this discussion help? This discussion will help us to know that whether in the theory building of that particular topic of your subject, whether it is going forward, how many are agreeing, how many are not agreeing. So this is how theory building takes place. Theory building is, we are not preparing, giving a new theory, but existing body of knowledge, we are adding on new knowledge about this particular village to the existing knowledge, with so many agreeing and so many not disagreeing. Both of this result, agreeing and disagreeing with the previous literature, is very essential for us to redesign our curriculum. It helps the government to rethink on the new policy, so that they can they can take care of the rural areas and increase the quality of education in that particular area. So the lacunas that are there, the shortcomings that are there in that area, can be covered and studied. Now, the same chapter, in summary and conclusion chapter, though the word discussion, suggestion, recommendation, etc. are not given, you have to write these essential elements in this particular chapter. After writing the discussion, as I told you, conclusions and discussions are the most important part of this particular chapter, and you should not make any mistake there. And a good researcher will know how to write those two things very clearly and properly. Suggestions for research. It is concerned suggestions are to be given to the concerned in the study, from whom and where the data is collected, from students, from parents, schools, etc. Suggestions can be given to students. Like in my study, I found that like, for example, when you use computer multimedia, you did better. We found that computer students who followed the computer multimedia and studied science did better than those students who learned science from the traditional method. So I suggest a student that along with your school teaching, use a lot of computer multimedia software. Parents also, I can give suggestion, help provide your children with computer multimedia students, make it available to them. To the schools also, I can give suggestion. So whatever suggestion should be totally based on the results of your study, totally based on the conclusion of your study, not like suggestion like ask the government to provide computer software. No, you have to tell from where to get the software, how to get the software, how to help the teachers prepare the software, give suggestions which are practical, which can be done, and not something that goes in the air, which is impractical. Or don't give suggestion to the government, go and provide in that school so many computers. That is all stupidity. So the suggestion to the concerned, whomever you have studied, give suggestion based on the conclusion of your study, which they can implement, which they can modify, which they can have meetings, have parent-teacher meeting, they can have teacher principal meetings, and in the school meeting or school community meetings, they can come out, that can discuss the problems that you found in your research, and whatever suggestions you have given, they can propose in the meetings, and then maybe they can some people in the school committee also, the parents may come out, they'll say, yes, I am a software engineer, I can provide the school with the multimedia software. So parents may come out, other committee members, even for example in the school committee meeting, there may be a MLA or a MP who says, oh, this school needs computers, I can, from my funds, I can give you a computer lab. See, remember your suggestions, if you make appropriate suggestions, which the school committee can take up. Yes, there are people in the school committee meetings, student teacher parent meeting, where these suggestions can be used and implemented very successfully. It is how you put it, not making casual remarks and with something that is not. You write it in such a way that they take it seriously and they take it in the meeting and try to implement it. Then recommendation, if it is a policy research related to any government policy. Suppose you study the midday meal scheme of the government. So I remember in one of the schools, there was some for the midday meal, they tried to they tried to provide eggs. Egg was provided because protein has to be provided. Some school teacher referred to the government policy, and then he provided eggs to the students for the midday meal. What happened it was a Jain school where the Jains don't eat non-vegetarian, and poor headmaster was punished. The headmaster was suspended, punished, and tortured by the school management. So things can happen like this. The recommendations that you give from your research, yes, what if it is on the midday meal scale, give the research. Some people may implement it as per their policy of the government, as well as the policy of the school, policy of the management. So things like that, one has to be very practical, and only if it is a policy research like midday meal scheme, or as I told you, introduction of English in the 5th standard or 1st standard in Maharashtra suddenly, or the comprehensive evaluation. But one thing you remember, whenever you do research on any policy, there's a rule. Whenever on a government policy you do research, you should allow the government policy to be implemented for 3 years. Only then you can do research on it, because only then the results will gradually come out. So that is a rule that you should also remember when you're taking up any government policy related research. Something the government policy introduce and suddenly jump into it, you will not get appropriate data, then your research will become a big failure. Hence, you should government policy research, wait for 3 years and go and collect the data. Then people also will know what they're doing and how they're doing it. Otherwise, it will be haphazard collection of data, which nobody understands what they're doing. Now, next year, after the recommendation, you give contribution to the field of education. This is very, very, very important that you have to write. How your research conclusion benefits the knowledge, gives new knowledge or added, what new knowledge is added to the subject or discipline, subject of education and discipline of education. If it is history, what new knowledge is added to the subject of history and to the discipline of social sciences. So that is what you have to write. Why should you write in this thesis? I'll tell you. Because as an evaluator, whenever a PhD thesis or a doctoral dissertation come to us for evaluation, first thing we have to answer as evaluators is whether this thesis has contributed to the knowledge of the subject or not, to the discipline of the subject or not, and whether it has contributed to society, whether it contributes to the society in any way. If your thesis has not contributed anything new to the field, to the subject you're studying, then it has to be thrown in the dustbin. So that is the reason why, if you do not write how this knowledge is beneficial to whom and how it has contributed to the field of education, we as evaluators will have to search for what is new in this thesis, what is the benefit in this benefit of your research for the field of education, and try to write something. If we cannot find anything to write, we say it has no contribution to the field of education. So you have to be very careful. You should say, you have to think and say how this piece of conclusion that you found, your topic of research, your conclusion you found, how it has added to the new knowledge. You are justifying in your second chapter saying this topic is new, nobody has done it before. If nobody has done it before and you have done it now, then what is the new thing that you have discovered? What is the new thing that you have discovered which is different from others or agreeing to other things? Then you write it in very nicely in few words, okay, that you have to justify. Then contribution to society. Like, how is your thesis how is your conclusion, your topic of research, your problem of research, and the solution you have found for the problem is beneficial to society. So if your thesis is not beneficial to society, again, your thesis is not good. So your thesis should help in theory building, or your thesis should have practical solution to the society. Like I told you, when the person in applied research, when that person, scientists discover, prepared a new pesticide to kill the pest, to save the crop, he contributed to the society. Wherever there was a pesticide for that crop in any part of the world, his his pesticide was beneficial to the society. Okay, so for the now contribution to the field of education, when Kohlberg discovered his, when he prepared his, um, when he prepared what do you call moral development, how it takes place, when he discovered steps of moral development, he developed 6 steps, 6 stages of moral development. Whereas Piaget, his theory was based on Piaget's initially. Piaget had developed 3 stages of moral development: moral stage, and the post-moral stage, moral developmental stage. Whereas Kohlberg had done 6 stages of development. He developed in his PhD thesis. Now that became universal. That was his contribution, was for the field of education as a theory of moral development. So now every PhD thesis cannot contribute to form a theory, but you can contribute to new knowledge generation in that particular area, like computer software that you have developed, which enhances the academic achievement in science of students, or scientific attitude can be developed, scientific temper can be developed by using your computer multimedia software. Yes, that is a new contribution to the field of education or to the discipline. Now, contribution to society. When I say contribution to society, whatever research you have done to schools, you have done to the students. So whatever suggestions you're giving to schools could be that is, students are a part of society, parents are a part of society, schools are a part of society. So whatever suggestions you're giving to improve the quality of education in students and the quality of education for the parents and to the schools, enhance the quality of education of schools, if you're trying to do, that is your contribution to the society, that you should be writing it very, very clearly. Now, after that, in the last chapter of your thesis, you will be writing topics for further research. Why should we write topics of further research? Because, as I told you before, now when you choose a particular topic for research, as I told you, you can do that research from psychological point of view, from philosophical point of view, from sociological point of view. Everybody has a liberty to have many objectives. For the same topic, I can have 100 objectives, but I cannot work on 100 objectives. So what I do is I select 5 to 6 objectives on which I do intensive study. Okay, so there are a lot of objectives left which I could have done, which I could not do because of the delimitation, because of the time factor, and because of the number of students I can do research on. I cannot do research on 1 lakh students for PhD. So that is why so what I do is I do it on a smaller sample and smaller number of tests. If I take up 100 tools, 100 objectives on the same sample, if I have 10, even if I have only 2 groups of students and I've got 100 tools, it will take a lot of time for me to conduct the test and admin. So I restrict it to number of objectives is less, number of tools become less, and the conclusion is naturally less. So topics of further researches, for the same topic, I could have used other objectives. Give a topic. I have conducted research on Marathi medium schools. The same research can be conducted on English medium students in another city, in another state. Or you can say, I have conducted research on multimedia tools for science. Multimedia computer multimedia development for maths can be conducted on the same students or on another set of students. So similar research topics for further research can be given, so that your junior students, the other junior researchers who tend to review your related literature, review your thesis as related literature, know the gaps in research. The topics of research is nothing but gaps in research which you have not done. So a gap in research which they can take up and continue to do the research on the same lines. So that is the reason why you give topics for researches. So this is all the 5 chapters I have explained to you in as much detail as possible. Now I come to the next part. I told you your PhD thesis is in 5 parts. Okay, first is your preliminary sheets, and I told you next is the 5 chapters. Then you have the references, and then you have the appendices. So you have the four parts. Then you have the references now. References are to be written in the latest APA style. APA style is the American Psychological Association. Now, American Psychological Association meets every year, and every few years they try to modify the style of writing references. The style of writing references, when it is a single author of a book, or if it is a research article in a journal, or whether it's a article on a website, whatever it is, how to write the references, how to cite the different works of different authors in literature as well as in researchers, how to cite and how to write the references. This given by the American Psychological Association. Now, one question that was asked in my last talk last week, in the last talk, my last talk by one of the students was, why don't we have an Indian Psychological Association? We don't have one. And even if some small associations are there, it is not accept whatever, nobody, it is not their one thing. And if it is there also, small people developing their own style is not accepted as a standard. As I told you, a PhD thesis has to follow the standard format. Only then it can be assessed by anybody in the world, whether your thesis goes to Australia, or it goes to Africa, or it goes to America, it can be assessed if you write in the APA format and in the standard format, which all of us have done and all of us are doing, and very good standard format is being presented to you. That is why in every PhD coursework and in the STP or in the refresher courses, this topic is always taken up, and also ethics in research is taken up. Whenever we do research, ethics have to be followed. It is not just plagiarism. It is pronounced as plagiarism, though the spelling is different. So whether it is not just the plagiarism part of it, the copying part of it, other aspects of ethics, there's a lot many things in it. It's a talk by itself, a 3-hour talk by itself. So we have to follow a standard format. So references has to be written in the American Psychological Association style, and that you can see on the Google also, the latest one. And you don't have to refer to the old thesis because it could be wrong. So the latest one you have to follow. And this is not, this style is relevant only for I just went through the Google, I found American Psychological Association style is relevant for education and psychology, whereas MLA style is applicable for, MLA style is used for languages and something else. There is also Chicago style and some other style. It is relevant for different subjects, but it is standard for some different subjects all over the world. I cannot write a Chicago style and submit it for assessment in education. Only APA style is accepted. Please remember that. And when you write a research paper, there the APA style may not be relevant. You have to see the style that is relevant, that is used by the publisher, of that particular journal. So the publisher may be using the MLA style or the Chicago style or whatever style they are using. You may have to may have to follow. Now, after the references, you have to write in that style. Now I come to the appendices. This is another very important aspect of your, as I told you, the page number, from the first page, you don't write the page number 1, but from second page of your thesis, you write page number 2, come till the last page of your appendix, keep on numbering. Then you know exactly what, all this is very much a part of your thesis, since the last page of your appendices will tell you how much number is your PhD thesis. Okay, now appendices, what goes in the appendices? Appendix number 1, letter from the department. Letter from the department you have to take. This is a request letter from the department for request to the institution for permission to the researcher to collect data to be signed by the HOD and the research guide. Another important instruction I would like to tell you is, there are some over smart assistant professors who do the research, our research students, my own too. Do not write your personal letter of request for data collection as PhD researcher or assistant professor. Many times they think that the assistant professor thinks, oh, that particular school, or that belongs to my brother, or it belongs to my, the headmaster is my elder brother or my uncle, so I don't need the letter from the HOD or the research guide. My letter will do. No, you may be, research has nothing to do with your personal relationship. Research has nothing to do with your likes and dislikes. There is no place for bias and prejudice in research. Okay, research is just search for truth, and it should be done in an academic manner, in a very formal manner, in a standard manner, without any bias or prejudice. As I told you, whether you like your research guide or not, whether you feel your HOD is more superior than your research guide, that is all irrelevant. Your PhD thesis contains only two names. One is your name and your research guide's name on the title page and on the cover page. It is a joint product. It is a joint intellectual product of this research thesis, a joint intellectual property of both your research guide and you. Don't think because you collected your data, you went and wrote this thesis, it becomes your personal property. Any research paper based on this research thesis, you can write in your own name and publish it and take the whole credit for the research paper. You are wrong. It is joint intellectual property. Any research paper that you take out of this particular thesis, if you any part of the thesis you take, research data, any table that you take and write your own research paper, there both your research guide and your name should be there. Whether to put you can put your name first and then the research guide's name, but without writing these two names, you cannot publish a research paper based on the data or content. Whether based on the data or content of this research thesis, you cannot write without putting your name, your research guide's name. So whenever you go for data collection, take the letter from the Department of Education, from the HOD and the research guide that is jointly signed for permission to collect data wherever you want to go. That is the first appendix number 1. Appendix number 2. That is letters stamped and signed obtained from the authorities who have permitted you to collect data with dates on which you collected the data in the institution. Suppose you conducted intelligence test on a particular day from a particular institution. So you, after that, if suppose you collected data on 5 days in that institution, on 23rd on intelligence, 24th on personality, 25th on attitude, you have to write in that letter, data for intelligence was collected on 20, you have to prepare a draft and say, sir, I have collected data from this institution on 23rd on this and 24th on this and this, from on your 8th standard students and 7th standard students. Write the details and give it to the head of the institution. The headmaster or the principal of that particular school, he will take that matter on his letterhead, and he will say, this particular research student had come and collected data on these days and collected tests on our students on such and such a date, and then he will give a letter. That particular letter has to be attached. Suppose you have gone to 10 schools, don't attach only one in appendix 2, one or two letters of 1 or 2 schools and say as sample. No, if you have collected data from 10 schools, you will have appendix number 2, appendix number 3, appendix number 4. All the 10 letters will be separate appendices. Okay, so that is the appendix 2 is meant for from where you collected data. This gives us the authenticity of actually whether your data collection is genuine or it is fake. Suppose somebody is doing research in Africa. Now nobody knows whether he has gone to Africa. He may be an African collecting data from Africa and coming and doing research in Pune University. And then at the time of PhD Viva, or even the examiner, if there is no letter from the authorities from where you collected the data, how will the examiner know that you actually collected the data? If there is a letter stamped and signed by the authority of that institution, that school or college or institution, then the examiner will know, yes, this data is not fake, it is genuine. At the time of Viva VOC also, whenever you come for Viva VOC, please take the original letters. In the thesis, what you do is you make a photocopy of the letter, and then you will be putting in the letter in the thesis as appendices. Okay, you have the original letters in your hand, and that should be brought at the time of PhD Viva VOC and shown to the person conducting the Viva VOC and say, the whatever I have put in the PhD thesis, this is the original letter stamped by the authorities. Then we know actually you have collected data from Africa or from London or from America, and this is a true data. Okay, that is why it is very essential. It is not one or two letters, but every letter that you have collected has to be attached with this particular PhD thesis. Now, Appendix 3 is the list of experts. Individuals you have consulted for validation of your tool or program, etc. Appendix number, that is, suppose you have tried to validate your tool, and for what did you validate your tool? For content validity, or you have validated your tool for if you have validated your tool for content validity, then you have to send it to the content experts. Then some of the experts have validated your tool and said, okay, it is correct. This particular title test will cover all the things you have mentioned in your title. So this validation of tool, the expert should give a letter saying he has consulted me for validation of the tool. Her letter, if she is not working in any institution, whatever her letter is there, she should have signed it. And if she's in some institution, on her letterhead, he or she should be giving it. And if you have more than one expert, then all the experts as appendices, you should be attaching their letters to know that if the examiner may be knowing that that particular expert, the evaluator may even talk to that expert and say, if you say I have collected data from such and such, such and such a person has validated my tool. If she is my friend, I will call and ask her what was the tool about and how has she done. Whether it is true or not, I can easily check. Okay, for seeing whether it is genuine or not, these have to be attached. Then appendix number 4 of your thesis should be what should be any other matter that is material for verification. Now, any other material, like for example, it is a historical research and you have collected data from some place, and maybe monuments, you have to give photographs of the monuments there. Suppose you have developed a computer multimedia tool, and you have a control group and you have an experimental group. I would suggest that take photographs when you're conducting tests on the control group for intelligence test, or when you're conducting on computer multimedia. When you're doing that, collecting the data, take some photographs. Those photographs, you can say from which school this is and which group of student, control group students, and then another photo for experimental group of students. By the uniform itself, we know which school this particular children belong, and from that uniform, we know which school that particular student belong. It is very essential for validation of whether it is your thesis is genuine or whether it is fake. We can verify by these photographs or any other material. So whatever material, whether it is a map, it could be maps, it could be some things which cannot be a part of the internal part of your chapter, that has to be attached. That you say that, say that it is a true, that this thesis that I've done is true. But here I will say, suppose your tool, if you have used a standardized tool, never attach it in the appendix or in your thesis anyway, because it's a copyright issue, because standardized tools are meant for selling. So they have a price to pay. So if you attach the whole manual, some of your junior may just use the manual as it is, and without purchasing the tool may Xerox it, and if you attach the scoring material or the test itself, what will happen? Somebody will Xerox it and start using the standardized tool without purchasing the standardized tool. Then it will become a big copyright issue. A brief of the standardized tool, especially the scoring method, to be included in chapter 3 in the tools for description. Now, this is it is 4.57 for 4 o'clock and 57 minutes. There are 3 minutes for my for this topic, and in this 3 minutes, I would like any of you to ask questions. One person had asked a question in the beginning itself. I would like that person to ask the question now, because otherwise what would have happened is I would not have been able to explain. Yes, can you all hear me? I would like to see your faces.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Because your time is up. I thought if the time is there, I would have shared something else.
Yes,
Now, how do I come and see?
Yes, ma'am.
I'll close this. Maybe I'll be able to see all that. Okay. I still can't see you. Any question? I can't see you all. I don't know where you all are.
And click on stop sharing.
Yeah, stop sharing.
Yeah.
Wait. Where am I? But here I should be able to see you. No, I can't, because I'd minimized it. Yeah, I can see Sandhya.
At the top.
Yeah, Sandhya, I can see only one person. What about others? Sandhya,
madam,
I can see.
Question, madam,
tell. I can see you now.
साधारण किती पेजचा असावा मॅडम?
क्या?
रिपोर्टिंग अहवाल साधारण किती पेजचा असावा?
Okay, you just see, one thing I'll tell you. If long back, there was one PhD thesis in India. I'm talking about 40 years back. There's one PhD thesis from Punjab University in India that was only 100 pages. And that was one of the best theses. But now it is not possible for 100. Minimum, it is usually 300 pages, 300 to 400 pages, a PhD thesis will be. Okay, now I have evaluated the PhD thesis in 2 volumes and 3 volumes of 300 pages each, which is a poor presentation style. You should be able to present your research PhD thesis in just 300 to 400 pages maximum. But it cannot be less than 200 for the simple reason your research methodology, your data, collection of data, your tables, graphs, etc. will have to come, and that is going to take minimum 300 pages. Or even the review. Now, review if you're writing, like people ask the question, how big should a review be? How much should I review? Now, review is, if you have 1,000 reviews, then I will say write it in brief. If you have directly related reviews, only 100, then I will say write your review in a more detailed form. So if your review is very large, then we say write it in like author's name and all the author's name and the year, put it together of similar researchers, and then you draw the conclusion. So review chapter should not be the major part of the thesis. All the chapters should be equally balanced. Okay, every chapter should be equally balanced, and your good research language and your good language ability actually matters here to write good research report. Okay, so usually it is 300, 250 and above, and 350 and below. That is the normal range of a good thesis. Yes. Any other question? Any other question?
No. May I? May I, ma'am?
Yes. Yes, yes, I can see you.
Ma'am, is it possible now for PhD? I'm just a budding researcher, but can you collect data via Google Forms? And if so, then how do you enter in the appendices at the end? How do you go about with it? Because that won't be
I
authentic
think,
data, right? There is no proof you can.
No, I'm not very sure about this particular aspect, because online researches, like in qualitative researches, I don't know how much they allow you to do it. In quantitative research, I don't advise this at all, because we do not know on when you collect online how much of data is true and how much of it is fake. It is very difficult to check the authenticity of the data, because I do not know whether, see, when lot of questionnaire comes to us, many times many researchers, research professors have no time at all. They do not have time because they're so much engrossed in the administrative work of the university. So what happens, sometimes the professors just give the questionnaire to some research student and say, go through this and see what can be done. Okay, so but what happens if that is done by great professors, because they don't have time to answer your Google form? How do you know who is answering? Whether the professor is answering or a student is answering? They will write all his details. The professor's details will come to you, but we do not know. But when you are collecting face to face, or there may be even video, you can have video conferencing, you can have interview. There are other techniques also. But I'm not very, it's not because I'm not comfortable or something. It is, I'm doubtful about it. Our software is not that on foolproof, where cheating cannot be done. Actually, the more advanced we are becoming, the more cheating is taking place online. That is the problem. See, earlier, many things could be done online and it was safe. But now there are new software and applications coming. Your data is no more secret. Everything is like, the moment WhatsApp was attached to Facebook, all the data they are leaking. If that is there, your research data, by a new application, everything may be fake. That is why by Google form you're for collecting, I don't know the authenticity of the data that you have. Many questionnaires also a kind of monkey. What is that monkey? You have the questionnaire that can be collected. But then what is the authenticity of it? Who is filling your form? That is the matter.
Yeah, right.
Only if it is video conferencing, interviewing directly, yes, you can. Okay. So you have to be very cautious. And even qualitative research people who are doing, I think you should ask this question to them also. Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, yes. Right. We should be asking more questions. There are lots of doubts people have, lots of mistakes people make. It's an open forum. Or I've given you my telephone number and my, what do you call that, email ID. Yes, if you tell me where you have met me, and you can ask questions. If you're doing a PhD or you're guiding, if you have any problem, I can always answer. Yes, any question? I'll be happy to be a part of your research. Yes. Any other question?
No.
Yes, Mr. Chavan, I can see you.
No, madam.
No.
Achha, no question.
No question.
Okay.
No question.
Okay.
Nice session, madam.
Oh, thank you so much for the compliment. Did you learn anything?
Yes.
Did you learn anything? I asked.
No.
You didn't learn anything from the session?
Some questions are there in chat.
You ask questions. Yeah. I can always clarify the question. Clarify your doubts. Usually people make mistake in the delimitation and limitation, scope, and old thesis, you have scope and limitations put together, utter confusion. Things should not happen these days, because good books are there. But talks like these, what happened, what is not given in the books, speaker will be telling you. That is the difference between a book and a talk. Yes. Shall I quit?
Thank you, ma'am.
There are
Yes,
no-
ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Okay,
You
well,
explained
Thank you,
all the
ma'am.
points
Thank you very
well,
much.
ma'am. The topic was very nice, ma'am.
okay,
And
thank you.
I would like to request Dr. Anil Patil sir for the vote of thanks.
Yes, yes,
Anil
ma'am.
Patil sir. Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Good evening, everyone, and respected ma'am. First of all, I would like to thank organizer who held such a great short-term course so that we can interact with such a great personality, respected Manayat ma'am had explained each and every point clearly of research methodology. Ma'am had explained all 5 chapters on how to write PhD thesis. The session was so fruitful. Thank you so much, ma'am, for spending your valuable time to interact with us and to share your knowledge. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you for the kind words you have used, and hope you will do good research. And anytime you can contact me, I would love to be a part of all your research. Okay, thank you very much. Good day.
Thank you.
Good day, and
Thank you so
all the
much,
best to
ma'am.
you in your life.
Thank you, ma'am.
Wish you all the best
Okay.
in your career and in your life, in your future. Hope we meet sometime. Okay, bye.
Thank you.
Good day. Good evening.
Thank you,
Thank you,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Nice
Okay.
Thank
meeting
you,
all
ma'am.
of you. Nice meeting all.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good day. Good day.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good day.
मला सोनालीच्या खंदारे सरांचा नंबर अर्जंट द्या.
Ma'am Geeta, are you there? Ma'am Geeta, are you there?
Thanks to Dr. Geeta. She's not there.
Mostly
Ma'am
not.
Geeta?
And Geeta on my behalf also.
Ma'am Geeta there?
Not there.
Is Ma'am Geeta there?
No, madam is not there.
I'm in charge of assign the duty to announce the resource person tomorrow. As in introduce the resource person. May I get the bio data, please?
मैडम मैं सेंड करता हूँ आपको बाद में.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
उज्ज्वल सर
हाँ बोला सर बोला.
खंदारे सर बोलतोय. सकाळच्या सेशनचं बायोडाटा मला सेट करा ना.
हो सर पाठवाल तुम्हाला मेंटर सेंड करतील.
I think I'm assigned the task to introduce the person, or are you assigned the task? May I know who's it? Because it shows my name. Ujjwal
Ma'am,
sir?
your name is day after tomorrow, Sunday.
खंदारे सर मॉर्निंग को
बोला ma'am.
जादवर रेखा सेकंड.
Tomorrow, is it? My name is
आपका जो
tomorrow.
है
Is
वो
it?
संडे को है.
Sorry?
नहीं मैडम
मैडम
आपका
संडे को है आपका.
अच्छा, ठीक है.
संडे है
ठीक है.
संडे.
Okay.
कल कंदारे मैडम कंदारे और जादवर.
सर ये फीडबॅक ओपन होत नाही सर.
फीडबॅक भेजा है अभी.
ठीक है.
फॉर्म सेंड किया ग्रुप पे.
होतोय.
सर तुमचा एंड्रॉइड अपडेट नसेल.
अभी हम एग्जिट हो रहे हैं. कोई इंफॉर्मेशन
झालं बंद लिंक वर करायची ना. झालं बंद लिंक करून देतो ना.
हे का?
मीटिंग एंड करू का
राहुलला
मॅडम?
पण सांगा ते.
Yes sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.